Uh, Thanks. Thanks for turning on my mic. First thing to do is a reminder to turn off your cell phones, silence your cell phones, computers, whatever you have, just so it's not going off during our meeting. And we have a land acknowledgement we do at the start of every meeting. As we gather today, we respectfully acknowledge that the land on which the city of Hood River sits is the ancestral home of indigenous peoples. This includes the Nez Perce, Sumatilla, Warm Springs, Yakima, and other tribes who stewarded this land for generations. We recognize the lasting impact of colonization and commit to working together for a more and just sustainable future. And first up is the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thanks. Abigail, any additions or corrections to the agenda?
Thank you, Councillor Folsom. I'd like to make one small change, which is we have an action item for approval to submit an OTIB loan. I'd suggest that we put that under consent. There's no real action item. This is just to give us permission to talk to ODOT about a future loan. And so just in the thinking about our very long agenda tonight, let's move that if that works for you.
Yep. We're moving action item 1 up to the consent agenda as stated. All right. So the agenda is modified with that. Is there, and I don't have any business from the audience. Jen, is there anyone online? No? Okay. All right. Moving on then. First up is a proclamation for Minyasui Day.
Thank you, Councillor. And I think some members of the Yusui family are here and could make some comments.
Yeah. And if you could, that little saucer with the red ring around, if you hit one of the red or white microphones on there, make it green. Thank you. There you go.
We're green. Well, I'm Maya Yasui. It's Janet Hamada, who you should know, and Nico Yasui. So we're here today to thank you for the signing of the proclamation. And we want to share just a little bit about Minoru Yasui. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with his story, but born and raised in Hood River. He is the only person in Oregon at this time to have received the Presidential Medal of Freedom. We wish there were more. But
hey, this is Paul Blackburn. Can you hear me?
We worked hard for about 3 years to get the Presidential Medal of Freedom awarded posthumously to Min. After that award was made, we started what was called the Minoru Yasui Legacy Project. So Nico has some rack cards for you that just describe what we do throughout the year. We also hold specific events, and this year being the 10th anniversary, we have a significant event. We shared electronically this flyer, which has a link to both live streaming or the actual event in Portland. And for those of you who haven't seen the movie Never Give Up, it was a documentary by Minoru Yasui's daughter, Holly Yasui. And it's going to be shown this Friday on March 28th to kick off the Justice for All week, which Governor Tina Kotek actually passed and is signing on the 27th of this week. And we would like to invite you to start the week by attending that at the Columbia Center for the Arts. There'll be discussion afterwards, but you need to sign up. So I will let Janet go.
Okay, well, I'll read the Presidential Medal of Freedom and what it says. It was signed by President Obama on November 24th, 2015. And it says, the President of the United States of America awards this Presidential Medal of Freedom to Minoru Yasui from the fruit farms of Oregon to the hallowed halls of the Supreme Court, Minoru Yasui devoted his life to fighting for basic human rights and the fair and equal treatment of every American. In challenging the military curfew placed on Japanese Americans during World War II, he brought critical attention to the issue and paved the way for all Americans to stand as full and equal citizens. Minoru Yasui's example endures as a reminder of the power of one voice echoing for justice. Thank you. And we think it's particularly relevant
Yes.
today to remember. And we also have some
This is,
buttons.
this is the Yasui Kamon. It's actually the kind of the family crest. It comes from samurai in Japan back about 400 years. And the Yasui family actually guarded the Summer Palace Road. And that was how they became designated as samurai. But I hope you wear the pins throughout this week, starting Friday and going through April 5th when we have the concluding event. And I hope that if someone asks, what is that pin for, that you have a response in terms of Minoru Yasui was born and raised right here in a home on 3rd Street and has brought a lot of fame to Hood River versus the notoriety during World War II that he brought to our community. So thank you very much.
Grant, can you hear me?
Yep, we can.
Maya and Nico and Janet, I see you on my computer. I yesterday drove through Tule Lake and today drove through Manzanar on our way here to Death Valley, where the internet is spotty at best. It was very interesting and engaging and fascinating to walk through. I had, of course, known a lot about the topic and Min before that, but to be seeing you guys talk about it on the very same day I was there is very touching. Thank you so much for your leadership. I'm so proud that we're joining in.
Hey, Mayor Paul, would you like to make the proclamation? Or would you like me to handle it?
Please take care of it, Grant. I can't see it right now. Thank you.
Gotcha. Okay. In that case, as acting in Paul's stead, there may now therefore may be resolved that the city of Hood River proclaims March 28th as Min Yasui Day. We honor his courage and dedication to the rights and liberty of all people and encourage all residents to reflect on his enduring impact.
Counselor, if I may add, Mayor Blackburn is out of town, but he signed a copy of the proclamation ahead of time and we'll make sure that you receive that. Excellent.
Thanks. Okay, next on the agenda. Update from Kat.
And I help to coordinate public transportation across the bi-county area. Sure. We've got 5 public transportation providers who are all working really hard together to provide a regionally coordinated system. And I am joined tonight with Amy Schlappy from Columbia Area Transit and Emily Reed, who is our consultant and has been for a number of years now. And she has really helped us bump up our game, get the word out to the public. People are buying gorge passes, they're getting on the bus. We're rocking and rolling these days. So pretty exciting. So first thing I want to talk to you about, we're going to go over 10 most important things, and we're going to go really fast because I know you're short on time tonight. So coordination is everything for public transportation, especially when you've got 4 providers that are providing the fixed route services. Next slide. So as you can see, this is our map. We're pretty connected. That was the goal since the year 2000, when the 5 providers got together. They've been working together for 25 years. It's just been the last few years that these systems have really appeared. We also coordinate on a lot of writer tools. One is the website that has the schedules, has interactive maps. We've got a transit alert system, and we have the Gorge Pass 2022. The 4 providers work together on coordinating on fare. Next slide. And we coordinate together on social media, really getting the word out to the public. We've got a great newsletter that goes out to every single Gorge Pass holder. I'm sure, hopefully, all of you get that and have a Gorge Pass. And we are out in the community. So we work really hard with our community-based organizations. We go to all of their events. We are out in the community in person. Next slide. Gorge Regional Transit Strategy. Some of you may have participated. That was completed in 2023. We had 150 leaders from around the 5-county area, county commissioners, U.S. Forest Service, state parks, all of our community health providers and community-based organizations were represented. We worked together on a collective vision and worked with the consultant to figure out the nuts and bolts of how to achieve what we want to achieve, what our goal is. And we are now working on that strategy. So the last 2 years has been really focused on working on the strategy. And this is what that looks like. So these are 3 buses from three of the providers. This is a pulse point where the buses all arrive at once. People run around like mad, getting on the right next bus to get where they're going. It's very exciting. Next slide. Riders, I'm going to pass it over to Amy.
All right, awesome. So at Gorge Transit as a whole, so all 4 providers have provided over 126,000 rides this past year. CAT itself has done over 83,000 riders on our fixed route services.
Uh-oh. This is because, here we go.
All right, and just to put that graphically, since 2018, we just keep going up, up, and up. And again, this is the all transit providers, and then the next one.
Ignore that little bump in 2020. It was nothing.
And again, there's the CAT. So again, 2018, we did an increase, and then of course 2020, and then since then we just continue to rise. It's about a 10 to 15% increase year over year. I'd like to remind people that ridership means that on our Columbia Gorge Express last year, we took off roughly 17,500 private owned vehicles from I-84. And then similarly on Highway 35 with our Gorge to Mountain Express service, we took about 3,750 estimated private vehicles off that road. This past year, our season is still going, but that is expected to be quite higher. And then on our Hood River City route, so in town, we had about over 22,000 riders this past year who took the bus instead of driving their private vehicle.
Okay, number 3. So top 3 of the top 10 is equity funds. So for every Gorge Pass you purchase, $1 of that goes into the Gorge Equity Fund that we set up. And these give passes to low-income folks. So any tourism who buys a Gorge Pass helps to support our local economy. And there's also an employer buy one, give one program that we would love you to spread the word about, because we're about to kick that off. And basically, if they buy 10, then they'll donate 10 directly into the fund. So giving passes to folks that need it. Number 4, dogs. You can take them on the bus. Number 5, bikes. Bikes plus bus is this beautiful combination. And as you know, the bike trail that is coming from Portland going all the way to the Dalles is going to be a game changer for our region. And bikes plus bus is a great way to extend your trip so that you can avoid
safe, unsafe areas and hills. And it's just a great way to, and, you know, kind of extend your commute as well. And as you know, bicycling contributes 133 billion annually to the US economy, and we're going to get some of that soon. More of it soon. Accessibility is the other big marriage. All of our buses are ADA and all of our drivers are trained to help with disabilities. And again, this is another economic driver because accessibility is a $53 billion industry, and Travel Oregon is really focused on that this year. So we also are doing audits of all of our bus stops. Every single one of them are getting an accessibility audit. 7, cost. This is one of the most interesting ones. So every single one of us who have a car, we pay an average of $10,000 a year to have that car every single year. You break that down to 72 cents a mile, according to AAA studies. So based on that number, if you take a drive right now and you go to the Dalles, it is, not showing for some reason, it is $42 round trip for us to drive. But if you take the bus, it's only $1 each way. And if you were to commute 5 times a day, 5 times a week to the Dalles, it's at $8,000 a year. So you're saving like $660 a month by taking the bus instead of driving. Or if you go to the airport, it's $90 by car round trip, plus any amount of time that you spend, any amount day, $12 a day for parking at the cheapest place there, or you can go by bus for $25. And that's if you don't have the Gorge Pass and you do it more often, and then it's really, really cheap the more you go. 8 programs. I'm going to hand it over.
All right. So a couple of great programs that we have are the Gorge Pass program. So that's the low cost annual pass that CAT and the other 3 other providers that all accept on our fixed route services. So for an entire year, you get unlimited rides on our fixed route services. We have here in Hood River the Student Gorge Pass program, where any Hood River public school, middle school, or high school student gets a free pass. They can get that from the office at their school, or they can come to CAT with a guardian or parent and their student ID, and we'll give them a free pass. Also, as you guys know, we are very happy to continue our partnership with the City of Hood River for the Downtown Employee Pass program, where any downtown employee can get a free pass. We have started the kickoff of that program this year and have been reaching out to eligible employers. Another amazing thing that we started last year, and we have expanded it to the City of Hood River, is a Youth Rider Rewards program. So during the summer, as the youth use the transit service and system, they can keep track of all the different places that they go, and they can get rewards. Travel dreams. All right. Some of you may know Sarah Crick. She is our wonderful travel trainer. She helps assist seniors, low-income individuals, and other, individuals with disabilities and other folks who just need some assistance with knowing how to use our service. She also manages our Gorge Transit Connect program, where we work with local providers to actually distribute our free fare programs. So our free fare, wow, I'm messing up tonight. Our free Gorge passes. All right, so the future. Some of you may have noticed that we have new Columbia Gorge Express buses. These are 35 passenger buses with 2 ADA spaces. Hope you see them. They're quite wonderful. And we have 2 of them, and we hope to continue this fleet in the next couple of years.
Oh, okay, this is me. On April 10th, I want you to get your calendars out now. We would like you to join us for the day. We're starting at the Columbia Center for the Arts, but we're going to a couple different venues through the day. We have an international speaker, keynote speaker, Jarrett Walker, who's going to talk to us about transit. You're basically going to start your day not knowing anything about transit. You're going to find it riveting, I promise you. And if you don't, I will pay you. something. I just guarantee it so well that I know that it's going to be an interesting day. So we're going to start off talking about why transit and how it really affects most of our biggest issues in the gorge. All of the different ways it does. So the morning we'll be tackling that. We'll also have a game show for riders, which is gonna be fun. And then we're going to have a hands-on workshop in the afternoon where you get to actually really fun plan your own routes and see how you do, because that's really fun as well. And that's also led by Jarrett Walker. And in the afternoon, we're gonna really focus on future and what the gorge will look like in all sorts of scenarios. So I guarantee it will be interesting. I would love every single one of you to come. It's free, there's free lunch. And it's going to be amazing. And that's really why we would love, we wanted to talk to you before it started because we want you there. So that is our top 10. And we tried to keep it time. Hopefully we made it interesting. I did not throw the trivia at you, which, you know, is also fun, but you can get more of that on the April 10th.
Questions?
Oops.
So,
Thanks so much for being here. I'm wondering, just the three of you, if you have any insight into like the top blockers for why people would not be, taking advantage of these services. Is it simply information? Is it, not used to using services like this in rural areas? What are the big impediments?
There's a lot. Yeah. So all of the above. Convenience. It's a rural area, so everybody just, by nature has a car. So it's easier to hop in the car than think about planning your route. So, but we have been really changing some hearts and minds on transit. We get a lot of people that start on the Columbia Gorge Express because they understand that how stressful it's going to be trying to find parking in Portland or trying to get to the airport. So we have them start slowly, get on the Columbia Gorge Express, and then they start to look around and say, hey, I can get up to the Heights, or I can go over to White Salmon. I can get up to Goldendale. So that's, people start slowly and then and then make their way through transit.
I can do the front door of Meadows instead of parking.
Yeah.
Wait on the hill and taking another shuttle and waiting. It's just, there's a lot of, once you redefine what freedom and ease is, it starts to open up a lot more options. But of course, we're addicted to our cars.
Yeah. So convenience is a big thing. It's way more convenient to ride the bus to Portland than it is to drive your car.
I think there's also, it depends on the route. So here in Hood River, the local route, I would say that sometimes depending on where you're going, it's not the use case doesn't always make sense for everybody just on a time basis, because it is a circulator route. We are working on that. We are trying to make that a more efficient service. And I think I would echo for our different regional services and our intercity express service, the Columbia Gorge Express. People just don't realize how easy it is. I had a new rider the other day who took the bus and sent me a text message and a picture. I was like, wow, I had no idea how easy this was to get into Portland. This is great. And I was like, yeah. So I think there's always those wins. And I think it's just getting over that threshold and getting comfortable using the bus.
And also it's really important that to recognize that for a third of our population here in the Gorge who do not drive for all sorts of reasons, the bus is a lifeline. So it gets them to school. So many people, it gets them to work. A lot of our youth with developmental disabilities got their first job last summer because they were able to ride the bus. There's so many stories like that. So there's one woman in Hood River who's able to see her husband who's at the veterans home in the Dalles because of the bus. She can't drive. So it's really important, I think, to remember that not all of us drive and not all of us can afford a car.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Oh, so can I make one comment? I want to note that they had a video in their presentation that we couldn't make work on short notice, so we will send the link out to all of you so you can watch that video later. My apologies about that.
All good. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Also, Counselor, you have already closed business for the audience, but you did have somebody come in late. If you want to grant that, you certainly may, and I can bring that paper to you.
We'll reopen business from the audience. Yep. Pasquale.
No, I'm fine. If I may, I just want to give you a little schematic map.
Then before you begin, just usual thing, name and the rest of the record, then go for it.
Thank you. My name is Pasquale Barone. I live at 1730 Orchard Road. And I own the Union Building between 200 and 500 industrial. For those of you who don't know, the building is about 700 feet long. And it covers, well, 3.5 blocks of industrial street. Council people, thank you for hearing me. I'll be brief. I'm here tonight to ask you as a business owner, both on our behalf and other business near there, to consider putting metered parking spaces on industrial. Currently, there are 30 plus, probably closer to 50 parking spaces that are free on Industrial Street. Free usually means that whoever gets there first and gets to park there for the day gets a spot at the exclusion of everybody else. So in fairness to anyone else who uses that area, meters would be a fair way to consider to use that spot. Historically, the Union Building and the Big Seven were food storage buildings. And then about 40 years ago, maybe a little longer, food storage was not part of these two buildings. All the food cold storage went to the, pardon me, went to Odell and other places. And these buildings were dormant for the better part of 30, 40 years. About 15 years ago, I started to renovate the Union Building. Pardon me. And we have townhouses, which coincidentally have 2 parking space garages. We have offices, we have music studios, we have potters, all sorts of uses down there. And for those uses, we have 20 plus parking spots on the east side of the building. The west side of the building, the free spots on the road are basically picked up and used from 7 in the morning till about 3 in the afternoon, which actively means that anyone else who comes for the offices, for the law office, for the clay studios, for the music studio, they don't have any spots to park at. So I would ask you to consider a fairer way to go. Put parking meters there. Abigail, I'm sure, might have other ideas, but make the parking down there a little fairer for everyone to use. And it might be a source of additional revenue for the city. Thank you. If you have any questions, I gladly answer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And with that, recess to consider the urban renewal agenda and hand it off to Councilor Sakina.
Thank you, Councilor Paulson. Open up the Hood River Urban Renewal Agency meeting. First on the agenda, any additions or corrections, Walt?
No, there are not.
Okay. Any business from the audience? Anybody here to speak to the Urban Renewal Agency Board today? Or anybody online, Jen?
No.
Okay, so with that, first thing on the agenda is the consent agenda. I would entertain a motion.
There's Before we get to the motion, just a typographical correction, just to make sure we have the names correctly typed in our minutes as well.
Should be Steve.
That's it.
Where's that?
Page. Page 4 of our packet. Instead of Scott, Steve.
Oh, okay. Steve.
Yeah, it's the same thing we talked about a month ago.
Okay,
Just want to make sure his name is correct. I move we approve the consent agenda.
first by Paulson,
Second.
second by Mitchell. Any discussion? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Online?
Aye.
Okay, chair votes aye. Consent agenda passes with the correction noted by. Okay, regular business items, Will.
Excellent. Chair Stepina, members of the Urban Renewal Agency Board, we have a appointment to the advisory committee for your consideration. Doug Brutches applied and was interviewed by Chair Kate Hoffman and I, and we wholeheartedly recommend his appointment. He has educational background in urban and regional planning that he has never put to work professionally, but has been a interest of his. So he's interested in this type of work, lives over on the west side. So this would be our first UREC member who gives us representation on that side of town where our new district is. And he just found him to generally be very well prepared, well researched, and motivated to serve on the committee. And so, and I think all that is reflected in his application in the packet as well. So with that, we forward the recommendation for your consideration.
Any questions for Will about the interview process or the application? With that, I would entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion, but I would like to just say how impressed I am with the people in our community and grateful that they are willing to help with us with this project, but very impressive application and thank you to him. For who's happening. I move to appoint Doug Bruches to the Hood River Urban Renewal Advisory Committee.
By Cavalieri,
Second.
second by Mitchell. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes aye, motion passes. Thank you, Doug's. So much for being willing to do this. Got another one for the Dougs. Awesome. And okay, next item again, Will.
Yeah, thank you. So last Urban Renewal Agency board meeting, we approved the qualified pool list, which gives us a list of firms to direct award for smaller projects that will help us move more quickly. So as a reminder, that's up to $100,000 per award if you're an architectural, engineering, or related service project, and only $10,000 if it's just for personal services, kind of general economic consulting, things like of that nature. So with those list of firms on board, I have an initial list of smaller projects that I think are shovel ready, so to speak, and that we can get moving on. I'm just hit each one with a couple sentences and be brief because I know we have a full agenda today. But if you want to stop and ask any questions, let me know. We did have a full conversation about this at the advisory committee, and some of their suggestions are in the packet, and I think they're all good suggestions, and I will follow up with the vendors to see what the scope and budget implications are. But just quickly running through them, first is to do preliminary engineering for the Mount Adams roundabout, sufficient to support right-of-way acquisition, and also consideration of a proportionate share district. The intersection of Mount Adams is only controlled by a stop sign going north, and it's already at a failed level of service and has stopped some needed housing projects already at the feasibility stage. So this is really the bottleneck to the development potential of the west side. And so this will get us going with some preliminary engineering that we'll need in order to take some next steps. Number two is Mariposa Village 2.0. As it, I think, was colloquially referred to during council goal setting. And so I have two essentially pre-steps. I'd say they're not even step one, they're like steps, step A and step B of zero level. But I wanted to do a research project to look at alternative delivery types of different housing types that we could do as an alternative to as the low income housing tax credit project like Mariposa Village was, and rate them on key criteria around how long does it take, how much is the public investment going to be, what type of affordability does it serve, and does it generate, the ability to have an ownership stake, categories like that. And keeping expectations low, this is still going to be a small project. So I'm thinking it might even just end up being more of like a consumer reports type thing where, plus on this, minus on that criteria. But the goal being to kind of just get a common vocabulary and understanding of what different publicly supported housing types are out there as we think about what we want to do next. And another pre-step for thinking about our next Mariposa Village project is evaluation of city-owned properties. That was actually a recommendation in our 2015 housing needs analysis that led us towards looking at Morrison Park. But this would be expanded much wider to look at all the other city properties that we own that aren't actively being used for any purpose, and looking at could they support affordable housing themselves, or could they be, if they're not being used, could they be liquidated to support affordable housing, similar to how we sold 2 parcels up on Sherman recently. Next is operationalizing the middle housing construction incentive. One, doing just a program review and getting standard operating procedures and administrative rules and kind of back-end tracking. We have the program up and running, it's posted, and anyone could apply for it at any time. But before really pushing the marketing, I wanted to bring in a consultant to just kind of look at the back-end administrative nuts and bolts of it. Which then leads into the other project, which is the program marketing. And so we, let all the local builders know, but I do think that there is a big untapped opportunity with the, roughly 2.5 million person metro area that's just down the road, and looking at how could we market this, and how do we create a strategy to target developers and builders and bring more attention to the area. Next is finalizing the West Side performance metrics. This was one that we didn't get all the way to the finish line with the 5-year action plan, but we have a good draft, and just looking for to be, just got to the finish line, updating for missing data sources, making it very publicly viewable, accessible. Second to last is related to Heights implementation. So this is one where the qualified pool list is not going to be the right vehicle to get us all the way going with the Heights. It's just these projects are too big for the small awards that are available. But I will have, I can have MIG, while we're getting ready to get moving, just work on taking those initial projects up to a slightly higher step of design and engineering. And then also get help issuing and administering solicitation for a firm to act as an owner's rep, essentially like a general contractor, or like to put it in kind of the personal home building like vocabulary, but someone basically who is public works engineering type person to basically shepherd along the implementation. So, and then lastly, creating a public facing development fee calculator. This would be in conjunction, in partnership with the city and with Dustin. We have a working development fee calculator in an Excel spreadsheet that does engineering fees, SDCs, and everything that you would normally have to maybe talk to a couple different departments in order to get. We can calculate it now in an Excel spreadsheet, but I want some help making that public facing and getting it up on the website and getting it a little bit more robust than the just spreadsheet it's on right now. So sorry, that was a lot of projects all thrown at you all at once.
And I think there's one more, Will, there's the Heights proportionate share district West Side.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. That is similar to Mount Adams, but maybe not as in depth because we don't need to do the engineering because the Heights Streetscape project is much further along. But there is a Big River Community Land Trust is looking at building some homes on Avalon that is going to put traffic onto on the eastbound going onto 13th from Belmont. And again, they're going to run into that lack of adequate public facilities finding. If we had a proportionate share facility or proportionate share district, we'd be able to give them a dollar amount that or at least give them a path forward to getting that to knowing what their dollar amount is that they'd have to write for their proportionate share. And then we could look at maybe ways of helping supporting that or, you know, it's kind of next steps down, but this at least creates a pathway to approval. And so we're applying to the state of Oregon for a grant to do this work because they have a fund that helps with design, engineering, and planning that supports housing. And so this would be if we got the grant awarded.
Yeah, thanks, Will. This is awesome to see so quickly. It was, February 24th after the QPL was approved and also much interest and everything to get all these, different projects, moving. Anybody have any questions for, please, Ann.
I have 3 questions. You want them one at a time or all together?
All one at a time.
They're pretty, okay, first, are these proposed projects in any kind of a priority list or like just?
No, sorry, I should put, so I think the highest priorities though are the Heights implementation and the Mount Adams roundabout. But I will say, I think we have bandwidth, funding to do all of these simultaneously.
That was my next question. Are they gonna happen concurrently?
Yes.
Cool. Okay, and then my last question is about the development fee calculator specifically. I'm curious if this would be a tool that would be something that property owners would use for improvement projects for their homes and businesses or just for new development. Like, for example, would a homeowner looking to build an ADU use the development fee calculator, or could the same, does it matter if it's like new development or like improvements to existing property?
Let me get back to you on that. I built it because I needed a way to calculate the middle housing construction incentive. So I certainly built it with the idea that it was going to be for new construction. But I'd be happy to look into like if it would work, if we could modify it to like cover if you're putting a solar panel in or something like that.
Yeah, thanks. I was curious about that.
Grant?
You said you can handle all of these projects concurrently. How much bandwidth does this leave you with?
Oh, it ebbs and flows, and some things will just go as they go. Certainly I'm going to prioritize the Mount Adams roundabout and the Heights Streetscape implementation.
Sure. In case other things come up at some point, interjurisdictional transfer, for example, isn't on this list, but something that we talked about or worked on in the past. So yeah, related. Just curious how much flexibility within there. All right. Thanks. That was it.
And anything from you, Mayor Paul, online?
No, I'm good.
Okay, so with that, looking for a motion to support the initial list of projects.
I move the Urban Renewal Agency Board support the list of projects as proposed.
I'll second.
Moved by Paulson and seconded by Cavalieri. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes aye, motion passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Will. Is there an administrative update beyond that? I'm assuming not. Okay. Any items from agency members specifically to urban renewal? None from me as well. So, okay, with that, I will adjourn the Hood River Urban Renewal Agency meeting and pass the gavel back to Councilor Polson to reconvene the Hood River City Council meeting.
Thank you. Okay. I have a script. Yes. It's this one. We now get go into ordinances. I call to order a public hearing for ordinance number 2090, an ordinance amending section 9.36 of Hood River Municipal Code relating to the use of consumer fireworks in the city. Let me begin with a description of tonight's hearing. First, staff will provide an overview of the amendment. Then we will take public testimony. And finally, we will close the public hearing, deliberate, and render a decision on the proposed ordinance. Final adoption may occur in the regular portion of tonight's meeting. That's tonight's procedural instruction. If anyone has any questions about the process as we go forward, feel free to raise your hand and ask during the public testimony portion of the hearing. A quorum of the council is present. Do any councilors have any conflicts of interest to disclose in this matter? If none, may we now hear from staff?
Counselor, appreciate you all being here tonight. This is a new public hearing, but you actually held a public hearing on this topic last meeting. That was to ban the use of consumer fireworks except on New Year's Eve. You asked us to come back with an amendment that would also ban sales. So that's what you have before you tonight. Nothing else in the language has changed. I do want to note just a couple things. One, the county commissioners discussed this at their meeting last Monday. They declined to revisit their code and made a comment that in the past, in 2018, the city and the county had kind of agreed to review information around June 15th each year and check with experts like the fire marshal and the forester to give everyone sufficient notice if they were to make a change to fireworks and really base the decisions on facts from experts. So I just want to let you know that the county discussed this and chose not to take an action, not to preclude us, but just to know that we try to coordinate with them whenever we can. I also want to note that the city recorder, who handles a lot of the permitting, contacted all of the sellers of fireworks in the past. So they've all at least been notified that this was being discussed tonight during public hearing. I think with that, that's the end of my very short report, and happy to take questions or set aside for comments.
Do any councilors have questions for staff before we take testimony?
Great. And I will note the city attorney is online if we have any questions that I'm unable to answer. Thank you, Dan.
Jen, has anyone signed up to speak? Is there anyone from the audience wanting to testify? Nobody? All right, then I will now close the public hearing and open council deliberation. Councilor Stupino.
Thank you, Councilor Polson. Yeah, I'm happy that we got the sale aspect of this cleared up. And sounds like Abigail, you and Dan have looked at what other cities have done in Oregon, and this passes that sort of smell test in terms of what other cities are doing. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think, well, first of all, I think we had shared that White Salmon had a very similar code. And then recently, I think last year, the city of Milwaukee had banned both the sale and use. So that was the one that I looked at.
Portland also has been through this slog and are now have banned both, and they're enforcing. There you go.
Thank you. Yeah, just another comment about that. You know, I think this is smart in light of all the red flag warnings we've had over a number of years. I know that through testimony or, you know, really comments rather from, you know, Chief Holste, from Chief Damian, you know, this isn't something that's, we're not going to have police and fire out in the streets being able to enforce this. We don't have the numbers to do that. But, you know, being someone that, if I would go visit a city or live in a city, you know, essentially it says, can I light off fireworks in that city? I would check it. And if it said that I couldn't, then I wouldn't do that. Do I expect others to follow suit? Yes. And they would probably do that. Do I expect others to completely ignore that and light off fireworks? Absolutely. But I think we have a duty as the city to be able to minimize fire risk within the city as much as we possibly can. And that's why I think this is a good idea.
Any other deliberations?
I'll go on the other side here. No, I'm probably in the minority here, but Yeah, that's just like I said for the previous meeting, but I'll say it for the record again. You know, philosophically, I just have a hard time, you know, telling people that they can't celebrate Independence Day in the way that it's often traditionally celebrated. I totally, you know, understand and respect the reasons for doing this. It did seem like that we had a pretty decent system that was already working. Also received testimony from police chief and fire chief saying that, you know, this would be challenging to enforce, and then adding, you know, on top of that, the, you know, not having the same rules that the county would is not my favorite thing. So, you know, this isn't something that I'm gonna advocate super strongly for, but I am not terribly in favor of this ordinance.
I'll just voice my opinion as my approach. I understand the feedback from both my fellow councilors as well as the chief regarding enforcement. My view, argument about this is just because it may be difficult to enforce doesn't mean it's not necessarily not worth doing. And for those wishing for a more traditional expression of American freedom, I encourage everyone to donate generously to the Lions Club to have a ginormous display down at the waterfront. And the more people donate to the Lions Club, the bigger the explosions shall be. That's it.
Here, here.
Yeah, I agree. Anything else, fellow councilors, to add?
I'll just say that I think that the purpose of this ordinance is really for the greater good of the community and the protection of our, you know, of one another. And I think that that's, you know, if we're putting everybody else before ourselves, I think just to make sure we're all safe. I think that that's, you know, that's the intention behind this, is to make sure that we're protecting our community.
If nobody else has any deliberations, I'm looking for a motion to place ordinance number 2090, first reading by title only under city recorder on the agenda.
So moved.
So moved by Mayor,
I'll second.
seconded by Councilor Sapina. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Chair votes aye. Ordinance number 2090 will have its first reading later on the agenda by title only.
Thank you, Counselor. And I'll note that this will be a first reading only. This is not an emergency ordinance. And we don't have, not all of the counselors are here. So you will see a second reading at the next meeting.
Since that ordinance was so much fun, let's do it again. I call the order a public hearing for ordinance number 2091, an ordinance replacing section 5.20 of the Hood River Municipal Code relating to taxi cabs, pedicabs, and transportation network companies, TNCs. Let me begin with a description of tonight's hearing. First, staff will provide an overview of the amendment. Then we will take public testimony. And finally, we will close the hearing, deliberate, and render a decision on the proposed ordinance. Final adoption may occur in the regular portion of tonight's meeting. That's tonight's procedural introduction. If anyone has any questions about the process as we go forward, please feel free to raise your hand and ask them during the public testimony portion of the hearing. A quorum of the council is present. Do any councilors have any conflicts of interest to disclose in this matter? And seeing none, we're going to now hear from staff.
Thank you, Counselor. I was surprised when I look back. We actually started this conversation in July of 2023, probably actually before that. That was the first time council officially discussed it. The current code that we have, Chapter 5 is, or Title 5, is silent on rideshare companies either allowing them or prohibiting them. So we need to take some kind of action, regardless of whatever you want to do. Our current code is not adequate. What I have heard from council the last time we discussed this was a direction to treat all forms of transportation network companies, TNCs, or rideshare, or taxi cabs, pedicabs, all of those things with the same regulations. And so that is what our city attorney has attempted to do with the language that he has used. A lot of what you see here is very common in, I think, the city of Portland. I think the city of Newport adopted, I think 2 years ago, the language is very similar to what they have. So a lot of what you see has kind of tried and true here in Oregon. I will note this is not an amendment. This is actually to repeal Title V, Chapter 5.20 and replace it in its entirety. Just a couple quick highlights. There is a piece about licensing the company and each driver. Operationally, how that works, I'm not exactly sure, but we'll work on that. And it also requires that licenses be renewed annually. It requires driver requirements, a proof of license and age, motor vehicle registration, proof of insurance, background checks, other driver information. And I believe it says at the city's request. I don't know that it's proactive. I think it's as we request it. And then third, insurance requirements. It requires a company insurance, commercial general liability, auto insurance. It does not require an annual vehicle inspection. And that is a part in that there might be a liability question of if the city says that vehicle is safe and then something happens, have we, somehow certified or blessed that vehicle? So that's a piece that I think is out. And then finally, just the enforcement, which I know has been a big part of city council's conversation. Enforcement is addressed in Hood River Municipal Code Title I, Chapter 10, and civil enforcement. Any violations would go to municipal court and a civil penalty of up to $500 per day. So that's my staff report. I also want to note that you received a letter in public comment today, and then I know there's some folks in the audience who may or may not wish to speak. Thank you.
Do any counselors have any questions of staff before we take testimony? Yeah.
My one question was either for Abigail or for Chris. Since last council meeting on March 10th, we approved a consolidated schedule of fees, and there are fees in the section 5.20.030. And I was curious if those are included in the previously approved schedule, or we're going to be anticipating amendment to that schedule.
So the fee schedule for the taxi cabs have a different calendar expiration. So those fees are approved. They don't take effect until January 1st. So I don't think they're addressing this amendment at all. They're going to change.
So does that mean if this gets adopted, there won't be fees until next January?
Well, if the ordinance had a fee associated with it, then that would be updated in the existing fee schedule. So I don't.
So if you choose to adopt this ordinance and when you make it effective, that is when we would put it into the fee schedule. Right. So if that was July 1st or January 1st, depending on how much lead time you want to have.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Abigail. I just wanted to ask, some questions that Matt Barman sent, just to get some clarification on what he's asking about. So he said the updated and increased insurance requirements were there, and a brand new one for general liability. How are those decided upon? What was the criteria for that? Or
Dan, can you answer some questions about how the liability and insurance rates were set?
Typically on insurance, I ship it over to our insurance carrier to see, different things that you do have different liability issues, some like almost none. And so the insurance requirements would be minuscule or non-existent. I don't know that this has a huge insurance or liability issue for the city. This is a business regulation. And so I don't want you to get in the mindset that you're here to kind of mother hen Uber and Lyft and make sure that there aren't any, sex offenders or pedophiles in among the driver corps. Although you don't allow that, you have a annual criminal background check. Thing is, if you have too much of a regulatory program, you kind of become a guarantor of these things. It's sort of like cities that have over-the-top tree cutting ordinances, and a tree falls on someone's house. It's kind of on the city, since they undertook to be very involved in tree safety. So this is a business regulation. It has opportunities. If there's a problem, the police chief can basically, if he sees a problem, can kind of have a driver removed from the driving corps, or as Abigail mentioned about cars and car safety. We don't really have the capacity to do that. And so we kind of have to rely on others and other certification programs like the state and has certain inspection programs. So for insurance, I defer to our insurance carrier for those sorts of things. And they're updated every couple of years in terms of types and policy limits that are customary in municipal contracts.
If I may, I think these numbers probably came from code from other cities who have already adopted that. I will note, however, that our insurance carrier, Scott Rainier, did weigh in that he thought those numbers were a bit high, and that they may be a burden for our taxi cab companies.
Which I think is the general idea that Matt's expressing here. So,
Yes.
yeah, so, I mean, certainly we don't want to remove the ability for taxis to operate. I mean, is this something we should have been looking at regardless if you're looking at TNCs?
If council wishes to adjust those numbers, we could certainly do that. I think probably, and I look to Dan for process, but I think if you were to do any change that's substantial, I would encourage you to then continue the public hearing and not refer to first reading tonight. And then that would give us time to, if you give me a number tonight, could check in with Scott Rainier and make sure that he's comfortable with that, and that recommendation, I could bring it back to you next week or next meeting. Don't meet next week.
Guess what?
Unless you want to.
Unless you want to.
What constitutes substantial, I suppose?
Yeah, I don't have a recommendation for you of what a number might, what substantial in the content of the meeting?
Yes.
Or in the
If
ordinance?
we were to make a, a motion, versus going to a different hearing, what's that threshold?
I don't know. I'd say that's kind of up to your city attorney as to what is so substantial that we would need to continue the hearing, or what we could change on the fly tonight.
I mean, you could tweak these numbers easily with that and do a first reading tonight. I mean, it's assumed that an ordinance comes to you as merely a proposal. You have a hearing, potentially hear a lot of testimony and opinion, and you change it as a result and run it up the flagpole on a first reading. That's how this is supposed to work. It's not anticipated that these things are, carved in stone and can't be changed without kicking it over. So you could, I think the only reason we would want to have some extra time, and we could do this, say you wanted to do a haircut on the insurance limits in section 050, particularly subsection F and G for pedicabs, and H as well. You could do that. We could then kind of just check back with Scott Rainier, kind of verify with him that it's adequate, and you could sort of do a first reading with those changes and do a second reading next time with those changes, and we'll have verified that they're in a reasonable range by then. So you don't have to kick this over. You could tweak it tonight and do a first reading.
Dan, if I can restate, I think you said we could make some number changes here, still hold a first reading, then at the next time, either confirm those numbers or adapt those numbers again and hold the second reading.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
So just to clarify, so if we pass something today as is, between now and the next reading, we can make these adjustments with consultation with Scott Rainier, everybody? Okay.
City attorney's nodding his head.
Okay, perfect. One more question. So, and you just sort of mentioned it, in preparation for this, a lot of the initial conversations we had were, it's going to be difficult to sort of, get language the way that things are, written specifically for Hood River and all that, which is great. So that we've, done all that fact finding. So can you talk a little bit just about the process, about, cities that you looked at, to arrive at the language that we got? Is it very unique? Is it boilerplate for Oregon? Just kind of a little bit about that.
Yeah, I will say a bit, but then I will ask Dan to expand on that. We'll say this is a conversation that city managers have had over the last several years. So in 2023, when we first started this, I reached out to city managers and got code from lots of different places. I think, like I said, Newport was the one that had most recently passed language so I kind of leaned on them, but they actually used the language that Bend, Sisters, Madras, and so the Central Oregon area had used, and I think they got theirs from Portland. Like, we all just plagiarize from each other. So that is the group that actually I will go back to and talk to about now, how do you actually enforce some of this? But yeah, I felt like what I heard really was very uniform across cities in Oregon. Dan, do you have more comments?
Yes, that's where it came from. You don't want to have every jurisdiction with a different sort of program. That's radically different. It's really hard for these interstate and nationwide models and companies to operate with a bunch of different regulatory programs. Plus also, I think Abigail early on said that this model is tried and true. It hasn't been yet, to my knowledge, has not been tested judicially. There are no reported opinions from the Oregon appellate courts about transportation network companies, period. So I don't want you to be the first one, and hopefully if there are any challenges, it'll be from some other jurisdiction. But I don't see this as this is not a whole lot different than the standard and long-standing regulatory program for taxi cabs. Our ordinance was adopted before Al Gore invented the internet, and so it's about time it was brought into the new millennium. It's not a burdensome regulatory regime, so I don't anticipate any lawsuits. What I anticipate maybe is some after a while of using it, the operators or passengers customers will come to you and say, hey, this is a dumb provision. This is not working for the following reasons, and you'll tweak it. And it wouldn't be for legal reasons. It would be for policy reasons or practical, this isn't working type reasons.
Thank you.
Then you got it. Oh, no. Okay. Thanks. Okay.
Like I have a couple things as well. I am definitely open to talking about the numbers. I don't want to make it prohibitive to tax cabs, especially if our insurance person is saying that is a little overkill. So I'm definitely for that. Also, I haven't had a chance. I don't know what our previous ordinance stated as, like what requirements were. So I'm curious about what the change actually was. And then my second question, I don't know if you want to answer that one before I go on or have it. Okay. Is kind of like, what do the TNCs, like, are our requirements different from theirs? Do they, do background checks on their drivers? Do they have are these basic requirements that they're already doing? So we're kind of just repeating the same thing. We won't have a big issue because they don't allow that anyway. So we don't have to worry so much about it. Or what's the overlap there, I guess?
Right. Thank you for those questions. I'll answer the second one, which is those TNCs or rideshares. They already comply with these rules in other communities. So I believe that they are able to meet those around background checks and insurance requirements and others. And I'm going to see if I can find the current code right now, as maybe if Dan has more and can share more about that.
I've got it, and I'm not seeing any dollar limits in here or policy limits. Keep in mind, this is back from the late, I think this started in 1995. But 1978, I think, is one of the first. Yeah, that's the first ordinance here, and it was amended a couple times thereafter. But
while you're looking at that, I have a related question. How many industries or businesses do we require to hold a minimum amount of insurance to just perform operations?
I believe we require it of all our franchisees who operate in our public rights of way.
And are those all the same limits? Or are they different limits per franchisee or?
I'll have to check. Those are usually bigger because those are also bigger companies. That's the other thing that's hard to kind of figure here. I mean, if you're looking at something like the dispatcher, Uber or Lyft, that's a big company. If you're looking at the actual, driver, if they're considered an independent standalone company, that's super small potatoes. And so what an insurance limit that might sink one wouldn't sink the other. So it's kind of hard to, I think that's the dynamic that's at play here.
And are we considering tax TNCs and taxi cab operators franchisees by
We
definition?
don't require a franchise,
Right.
but they are, a franchise is basically a license to use the city's public rights of way. It usually connotes a utility of some kind.
Correct.
These aren't utilities. They're not putting permanent facilities in our rights of way, but they're using our rights of way. By the same token, we don't require insurance. We don't impose insurance requirements on FedEx or UPS, which also have, their vans on our public rights of way all the time. There's less kind of public contact or involvement with our citizens. And so I think there's less concern than there is for taxi companies. Also, there's taxi companies, the kind of municipal regulation of taxis go way, way back. It's a longstanding historical thing that goes way before my time. And I've always been sort of perplexed as to why it is such an elaborate thing. Why do we have special taxi cab regulations? So I don't have a good explanation for that, other than what we see in the modern era with Uber and Lyft, where we hear stories in the national news of, some Lyft driver kind of becoming sort of a serial axe murderer and, posing a problem for the constituents, and people will then come to their elected officials to do something about it. So that's the only explanation I have for why we have special elaborate regulations for this kind of company.
Commentary goes back to generally around Chicago, especially when people would like toss people in the back of horseless carriages and wheel them around with no safety measures of any kind. Too many people were dying at that time doing that. So that was sort of the birth or advent of these regulations historically.
Right. I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Yep.
It's old. It's very old.
Yep. Yeah.
I would agree that we want to have some insurance regulations for this, just because, and if, Scott is an expert on this stuff, and I'm grateful for his input. And I think if he has some ideas of what those limits might be, I would definitely be interested to hear what he thinks. But I think it's a good idea to have some insurance provisions, just because it is a public safety measure that we can implement.
So right now, your ordinance doesn't set policy limits. It just says no one can operate a taxi cab without first filing with the city recorder a policy of public liability insurance issued by a company licensed to conduct business in the state, attesting that the insurance company will assume responsibility for injuries to persons or property caused by the operation of the taxi cab in the amounts indicated in state law. Refers, I guess there's a statute that prescribes taxi cab insurance limits, but also those are changing constantly. That's why I check with our insurance carrier for current reasonable amounts, and have a provision, make sure there's a provision against cancellation without notice to the city. That's all it says in the current ordinance.
I don't know if this is like parallel or at all, but like, we don't have very many, we don't have like a business registration with the city for normal businesses. So I think this is just kind of out there anyway. I mean, I know for places that sell alcohol, you're required to have a minimum liquor liability insurance, like through that process. So I mean, their businesses in general
are required to have insurance. I think it's like the regulation is a little weird because we don't have that as part of our city operations, so just throwing that out there.
Could I'm gonna make one more comment before you open to the public. And that is this change, if you choose to adopt a new ordinance, does not guarantee that Uber or Lyft or any other company will come here. It simply creates the regulatory environment in which they can operate. So you pass this, I cannot promise that there will be a flood or that it will be a lot or a little, just that it sets it up so that it could happen.
Question to that, I mean, could locals then begin applying and drive locally versus, I don't expect. It's very profitable to drive from Portland and back and spend time here for little rides within the city because also, I mean, again, the county is not doing this, right? So it's.
Right. The county is definitely interested. I got a text from the county administrator today about how, we've talked before at council of, this is a point of origin. So if someone were to start a ride in Hood River and then they go out to, let's say a winery or a wedding or something in the county, that trip can be completed, but then they're unable to start a new trip coming from the county into the city because it's all regulated at the point of origin. So the county is very interested in this conversation and about what language you might adopt, that they might be interested in doing something similar or working with the cities to create some kind of consistent piece.
Thank you for that.
Thank you.
I'm just checking in with Paul online. Paul, do you have any questions?
No, you guys are covering it pretty good. Thanks.
Thanks. If there's no other questions. And Jen, has anyone signed up to speak? Okay. Is there anyone else from the audience that wants to testify?
I can see some of our business owners, our taxi cab owners and operators are in the audience. So I want to publicly thank them for all of their hard work over the last year and a half. And Amy Schlafly, the executive director of CAT, who has really worked with us to through this process and brought you data and reports. And I've really appreciated working with them.
Then in that case, I will now close the public hearing and open the council deliberation. We'd like to, yes.
Thank you. Yeah, this has been a long conversation for us. Yeah, formally July 2023. I want to echo what you just said about, Amy with CAT and all the taxi operators really working with us. This isn't something we wanted to go into super blindly and just say, yeah, they have TNCs now, let's just do that. So I'm really glad that the city got to work to be able to refine and get feedback from everybody that's currently operating. Certainly want to continue to get feedback in the spirit of what Dan said, should we pass this tonight? I want to make sure that this isn't something that's, impediment to anybody doing business and hurt the businesses that are operating within the regulatory standards and correctly and all that sort of stuff, right? So I'm in favor of doing this, but also in the spirit of let's make sure it's tweaked accordingly, and with the first thing being the insurance requirements are looked at and all those sorts of things we just talked about. But thanks to everybody that's been on council, the new councilors that have taken this up, everybody that's worked on this in the city, and everybody that's worked on it in terms of the operators as well. So a lot of discussions here. So appreciate it.
I have a couple of things. One thing that stood out for me when reading this ordinance was assessing a fee per each driver who's going to be driving. If we open this up to Uber and Lyft, for example, operationally, I'm not sure how Uber and Lyft are going to be able to track those because they'd have to geofence it or track it in some form or fashion. I'm not sure how we're going to be able to do that. So just holding ourselves accountable to that operationally going forward is a concern that I will have. And then as far as the insurance side of things, I understand the concern, making sure that everybody's covered and safe and all that good stuff. I have a concern setting a relatively, from my perspective, arbitrary minimum from our seats. We can certainly discuss that and figure out what makes sense. However, generally, TNCs, taxi cab companies, and whatnot will carry insurance because they're required to do so just to drive, and will have some level of insurance just as a general liability policy. What that level is, we could set that minimum. They will do a good job, I think, as well, of carrying that on their own too. So that I think is where our debate is tonight. But that's my perspective.
I don't think any of us have, at least I don't have the expertise to say what those minimums should be, but I appreciate that Dan mentioned that there's already statutes at the state level that say what they are supposed to be. And I also think that they're also in place just to, for public safety, but also for the credibility of our providers. And just to let the providers can say, we are able to meet this minimum threshold, and, therefore you're safe and, traveling with us and using our services, which I'm grateful for. So I don't know if it makes sense to, my thought is we either, again, defer to Scott and have an idea of what those minimums should be, because he'll have a reasonable idea of what that could be, or we adopt language similar to what Dan already said that the previous ordinance had, where it says, you say it's the state minimum. And that way, if the state minimum is raised, our ordinance is already up to date because it matches what the state requirement is. Is that an option, Dan?
Dan, you're muted. Also, I'll note, I've been looking through the ORS 030 while we've been talking, and I'm not seeing anything specifically to taxi cabs. There's something about test drives. This is a real miscellaneous one. There is food-related conditions, skiing activities, farming and forest practices, but I am not seeing commercial vehicles listed here. So I'm only taking a very quick dive into this, but our code has not been updated in so long. It is possible that is referring to something that is no longer in there.
If that's the case, the statute our code refers to was repealed. How long ago? Let's check this out. It was repealed in 2009. So that must have been the taxi cab insurance limit section of state law.
Another reason why we need to update this code. So I'm not sure that the state, we can research this, but I'm not sure that the state can give us guidance at this point.
Sounds like there's maybe a number of things that were but not dialed in on here, and I don't particularly see the need to rush this necessarily. Like there's not like any sort of, it's not like there's the contract expired, any, like there's not really some kind of inciting action. I've been working on this for 2 years. Not me, I wasn't on council at the time. So I don't know how, like, if this is starting to rise to the level of that, maybe we need to continue this. I don't know what other councilors are feeling like, but it sounds like there's maybe a number of things that we should probably dig a little bit deeper into. But I appreciate your work, but I'll maybe raise some questions here tonight. I don't know how other councilors are feeling, but I'd like to hear their thoughts.
Beyond insurance, what do you mean?
Are there other?
Well, just talking about that in reference to that ordinance that was repealed in 2009, that was referenced in this code that is.
Right, regarding insurance requirements.
In this code or in the previous code?
Oh, I misunderstood that.
Yeah, that was in the previous code, right?
Yeah, the one that predates the internet. So I that's kind of a common factor. What I would do, based on the body language I hear tonight, is verify tomorrow morning with Scott Rainier about something like cutting in half these policy limits. So subsection, it's 050 subsection F, taxi companies and TNCs, commercial liability insurance of limits of not less than $500,000 per occurrence and 2 million aggregate. That might be too low, but 2 million is pretty high for a car, one person, one car operation to carry. If that's the TNC, the other thing I need to think about is I think Uber and Lyft have these kind of policy limits. Do we want for each, independent driver with their own individual car, what do we want them to have? And I think that's what you're more sensitive to, right?
I'm seeing nods.
Yeah.
Oh, nods and yeah.
So like the pedicabs, I'm not sure what's reasonable for a pedicab, but 500,000 per occurrence and $1 million aggregate. What you look at is what's the likelihood of accidents and what is the likely severity of an accident involving a taxi cab or versus a pedicab, those sorts of things. Since pedicabs can't go that fast and are pretty conspicuous on the street, I don't know. It just strikes me that it's less likely to be have a huge amount of liability associated with it. And you just want to make sure if there's an accident with property damage or personal injury or death even, that there's enough insurance to, make the person whole or make their next of kin whole. So.
Guess I have some interest from Councilor Mitchell to continue this to a date in the future while we do additional research. Is there interest from other councilors to do that, or is there interest to move this forward tonight? Councilor Stupinian.
I'd like to move it forward tonight if we can make these tweaks with, which is what I'm hearing that we can do.
I support that. It's just like the one topic, the insurance is the thing. So if we can change the insurance language, then.
Sure. And this is a procedural question for Dan. We would be able to make a motion with those proposed changes yet to be determined based on some numbers that we're not sure of yet.
Yes.
Based on feedback. Yeah.
Yeah. So you could make a first reading of it as it is now, or you could amend these numbers, have a first reading of that.
I think I've got an idea for a motion if I'm willing to, if it's okay to be ready to try. All right. I move to adopt ordinance 2091, amending the Hood River Municipal Code section 5.20 to provide for and promote the welfare of the general public by regulating vehicles for hire within the city of Hood River, and have its first reading by title only under city recorder, subject to the potential revision of the insurance amounts in
Section 050.
050
F and G.
F, G, and H.
Okay.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Thank you.
Counselor, if I may just chime in.
Yeah.
Unlike fireworks, where when you made a change to ban sales, we had not included vendors in the past, so I really appreciated the chance to connect with them. I do think the taxi cab operators and owners have been part of this conversation all along, and so we will be able to keep them informed if you wish to make a change on this part.
In that case, I'll call a question. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion passes. The ordinance number 2091 will have its first reading by title only under city report.
Super. Thank you.
Okay. Now, back up to the consent agenda, and this is just as modified as before, which includes item number 1 from our action items. Is there a motion to do anything with that?
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
I second.
Motion and second to approve the consent agenda. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Chair votes aye. Agenda consented. Action items number 2, Mariposa Village Development and Disposition Agreement. Will.
City Council, we have really the culmination of about a decade worth of work here for your review and approval to effectuate an agreement for the development of affordable housing complex on 7.1 acres of land that the city purchased back in 2019. Let's see. So the development and there's 3 agreements in the packet: development and disposition agreement, a regulatory agreement, and a loan agreement that all do 3 different pieces of making Mariposa Village happen. So development agreement basically covers what is going to be built and concludes when we agree that all of the conditions of the development agreement have been met and issue a certificate of completion. There's a regulatory agreement that oversees the operating of Mariposa Village and its continued affordability and eventual divestiture of the one of the for-profit party, and to then be transferred over to Columbia Cascade Housing Corporation, the nonprofit partner and development arm of Mid-Columbia Housing Authority. And then finally, the loan agreement covers how the city facilitated portion of our funding obligations are put into the project. So the agreements are attached in their substantially completed form. There is leeway in the resolution to delegate authority to the city manager to approve any minor modifications. And we expect there will be minor modifications leading up to the very last minute. Could be something as simple as saying that the construction period is going to be 41 months instead of 40 months, or updating cash flow projections in an exhibit. But what isn't going to change is the substantial portions that we're getting 130 units of housing, 129 of those units at 60% AMI or lower. That we're going to be building to National Green Building Standard Gold. We're getting an extension of a public roadway, an enhanced pedestrian activated crossing beacon across Rand Road. And the units will be well equipped with automatic dishwashers, air conditioning, programmable thermostats. We'll have on-site trash recycling and compost. Trail connectivity of the major west side trails that are going to pass through the site is guaranteed, as well as a publicly accessible park with some really high grade play structures, and also some wetland protection and mitigation on site. So those are kind of the big high level pieces. There's really, and I think you've got about 140 pages of contract there. So there's really more than I could continue talking for hours. But I think also that everyone here is very familiar with the long road and the process that got us here. Do want to just note Kevin Liberty, senior planner, who has done much of the heavy lifting on this project from its inception back in 2019. And then also Heather Martin and John Warner, who have been consultants that have come on with us in the last 6 months and have gotten the agreements to the state that you seen here today. And so if you adopt the resolution and give the manager, delegate the manager the ability to execute this agreement, we'll be on track for closing in mid-April, with hopefully construction starting in mid-May. And I think they may be opening up in phases, but finishing construction in early 2027. I just also want to recognize that Karen Long, Executive Director of the Housing Authority and also Columbia Cascade Housing Corporation, I see in the audience as well, and has been a great partner through this process. So that'll answer any questions.
Great. Any questions from council?
Did you all read that contract? It's awesome. It is an incredible contract. I was really impressed. So good work in putting it all together, and know you guys read the whole thing, because I it's really good.
I as well read the contract, yes. Any other questions? Any questions, Paul, Mayor, online?
No, you guys are doing,
Hey. All right. There's a motion in the packet.
I move to adopt the resolution 2025-08, authorizing the city manager to sign the following agreements. Agreement for disposition and development of certain real property, regulatory agreement and loan agreement related to the development and operation of Mariposa Village in substantially the form included in tonight's meeting packet, and to take all necessary action to effectuate the listed agreements.
Second. There's a motion and a second. Any further discussion of Doug's verbose language? All those in favor?
all right,
Opposed? Chair votes aye. Motion passes. Thanks. Thanks, everybody doing that. All right. Jackie's not here tonight. So next up on the agenda is a parking fee waiver for enrolled tribal members. I assume Abigail's taking it up.
I am taking this one. Thank you.
Great.
And really all credit goes to the mayor who had this idea, brought it to council probably a year ago. And so if the mayor, I will definitely yield to him if he wants to speak a little bit of the genesis of this.
thanks, Abigail. The genesis of this was that I heard from a friend that Holocaust survivors in Austria are granted a disabled parking pass, which seemed at first a bit of a funny random disconnect, but upon further reflection, as the mayor, I'm often frustrated by the power I don't have, but I thought, oh, well, we could offer free parking because we own that. So we moved ahead with that and had a lot of discussions with my Equity Advisory Council and with counselors. And I'm very pleased that this is moving forward. It seems sort of like one of those, it's the least we can do things.
Great. Thank you, Mayor. And then I will just say internally, staff have worked, police chief and the finance director, staff have worked through what this looks like operationally. I think we think it's probably something that hangs from a rear view mirror, and that it probably is every year. There are some, I believe the Yakima Nation actually issues license plates, so those folks wouldn't need it. It would just be the license plate. So I think we have figured out just how those will work operationally, but we do suggest that it just be for this first year, just as a pilot project, make sure we get it. And I also want to note that our recommendation is that all of the other restrictions still apply. Still 3-hour limit, still no parking in the loading zone or handicap spots or spots that are already that permits have been sold for, spots that are reserved for permit holders. So that's kind of the end of my report. You have a resolution for consideration and a motion in the packet.
Questions from council? Sure. I get asked the questions, since I did last time. This proposal and this policy, I have the concern that, as it's structured, as it's presented, as we were presented it last time, is a way to outreach to a community that's been historically mistreated. We have a land pledge acknowledgement at the beginning, of course, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I am concerned that through this action, should we, in the spirit of inclusivity, which we just last time signed a resolution about, are we telling ourselves, this is going to sound terrible, I'm using terrible, my words are terrible about this, I can't explain it correctly. We would, by moving forward with this, we are serving one group and not all of the other groups that have been historically mistreated. Whether we choose to do that or not, great. That's my concern. Are we going to extend this program to every other group that's been marginalized in the past, or are we not? I understand that not every group comes here and asks for these things, but it is a concern that I have, and whether we share that or not, we can choose to vote on that. So hopefully adequately express that without coming off in a bad way. So.
I would just say that I wasn't, on council for this discussion, but I would say that Native Americans are in a really unique position in terms of how they were marginalized. And I think that this kind of speaks to that specificity. Yeah, that's all I'll say about that.
Yeah, I agree. It's, this is their land historically, and it's basically all been taken. And so, yeah, the very least we can do is free parking. And yes, there are lots of other marginalized groups. And maybe we can help them out in some ways, other ways, maybe parking in the future. I don't know, but I think this is a good place to start. And if, yeah, Paul has anything else to share about, because I haven't really been on process, and if you have anything else to share about the equity group and their thoughts, I would like to hear that too.
Thanks. 2 points that came up. I would appreciate Grant taking the time to visit with my equity group on this, and I thought that was a valuable and interesting discussion. My colleague and friend Don Lemieux commented that some folks belong to a tribe or a group of Indians that is not officially recognized, and so sometimes their ID is not like a laminated driver's license. Sometimes proving their membership is like sort of like bringing your, like high school diploma to the parking meter. So that's not like super convenient. So there was a number of sort of like imperfect operational details about that, but I decided let's give this a shot. And if we all hate it in a year, we're the city council. So I'd like to move forward.
I just want to say that, with Council Polson, it's, I appreciate that you're asking a hard question, and I appreciate that you're bringing that up, but I also agree that it's, what Councilwoman Goki said too, of like, this is a group of people that, if we can take some gesture to thank them for, or acknowledge that we are here as stewards of the land that was originally theirs. I think that this is a good step to take, but I really do appreciate that you're asking the hard question.
Also just add that we mentions in here that the port is already doing it, so we do have that kind of like, precedent, if you will, so.
Yeah, and I have some background on the port doing it. Since they have a bridge over the Columbia River, it's different in context. There's different requirements or things around that versus parking regulations downtown.
Right, I agree with that. I think the port does it as part of their negotiations. It's something that they have negotiated as opposed to a symbolic gesture or something they chose to give. Because the port has formal negotiations with all of the 4 treaty tribes. And they're consulted in the new bridge process and other pieces they do.
In order to build a bridge across the river, you need to have agreements with the 4 treaty
With the
tribes
6 sovereigns.
and the federal government, and part of that was part of the conditions.
I will note, however, that the port chose to recognize all tribal,
Yes.
all tribal members of any enrolled tribe in the United States and Canada. Previously, they only did the 4 treaty tribes, those were the ones with whom they negotiated, but they did expand that probably 2 years ago.
Thank you both for providing that very interesting context. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I do not disagree with my fellow councilors at all regarding the outreach. I just see the rest of the community who's not here asking for the same consideration. So it's just a more long-term concern or thing that has weighed on me. So there's no further discussion. There is a motion in the packet.
I move to adopt resolution 2025-09.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed? I'll vote nay for the reasons I said. Even though I don't like to read either. Motion passes. Thanks.
Thank you, Council.
Next. Brookside annexation agreement. Dustin.
Thank you for adjusting the climate in here as well. Yeah, appreciate that.
Trained professionals over there, willing to serve. We thank you for your service. Thank you, Council. Tonight you have before you a request as a part of your annexation actions and zone change for Brookside Avenue, generally known as 3300 or 3330 to 3350 Brookside Avenue. You had a number of conditions of approval associated with this request. For those joining in, this was an annexation of 11 acres and zone change that occurred earlier this year. Since that time, the annexation and zone change ordinances have passed. They have not been appealed. The applicant has closed on the property and is now the owner of the property. To complete its conditions of approval, you have before you an annexation agreement, which was one of the conditions to complete. Before that is completed, the applicant has asked for 2 modifications to that agreement, and they're outlined in your packet. First condition was the applicant has requested, and it is bound to dedicate an easement allowing for the extension of the Indian Creek Trail, which was one of the primary motivators. In this case, it's approximately 1,500 feet in length. In that we always try to put milestones before this happens, prior to this happening. When will this occur? Included in that was prior condition that said prior to the issuance of demolition, construction, building, lease, license, site development, really a laundry list of things that they would dedicate this easement. Since that time, the applicant has gone to the property, I believe has secured the property, and we have them online too, and has a renewed and urgent need to demo the property in order to secure some insurance on the site due to its condition. So they have asked that to be allowed to demo the building before they dedicate the easement, but still revise that condition as such. I spoke with the neighboring property owners today. And I believe the applicant is now in contract with the neighboring property owners to sell the northern piece of the property. You heard from a number of them that they were interested in seeing that preserved. They came and spoke with me today to notify that that was their understanding. They'll be looking to purchase it and possibly dedicate it to Parks City Nature Conservancy to retain it and keep it as open space. So that is in the works now. So with that, the applicant has already begun preparing its survey documents to partition this property, necessary part of sale, necessary part of establishing easements, and part of the site development. It's really to divide the property up. So they're working through that prior to approval. That vehicle preliminary plat could be used and is typically used to dedicate easements, such as with Mariposa. We use that as the vehicle to terminate old easements and dedicate new easements to the benefit of the public. Second modification, within your report, there's a condition of approval that the C2 section was to be no less than 50% and not less than 10 dwelling units maintained for the purpose of 10 years. And then after that 10-year period, the multifamily structure on the south portion would be converted or could be converted to condominiums subject to city regulations in the Muni Code. Since that time, the applicant has requested that they be allowed to immediately go to the 10-year period and to have their multifamily structure, however developed, be allowed to be converted to condominiums or developed as a condo project right away. Estimates are that this would be a 50-unit development. We haven't seen a land use case for this yet, but this is all coming from applicant who I believe is online and could chime in based on your questions, comments.
Any questions from council? Anna.
My one question for you, Dustin, is about section 6, where it says that the applicant shall dedicate to the city an easement for public ingress, egress, and utilities. I appreciate that the city and the applicant are the two parties engaged in that annexation agreement, but would that possibly be to the city and its assigns? If we are is the city planning, is it the intent that the Parks and Rec District will have the easement for the trail? Typically, they are responsible for maintaining the approved trail. So if you could just speak to that a little bit, that'd be great.
Yeah, we get, part of the easement, we currently have sewer utilities in there, so part of it, city actually owns utilities in there, but really, and we can use Mariposa as an example, the way that we try to establish this is not really directed to a public body, either the city or parks, and really focus the easement around purpose. The purpose is a public access easement for the trail. The city would kind of be the broker here for it, but much like Mariposa, the idea is a public access easement for the benefit of the public, not necessarily solely directed to a single body. So in your example, if Parks and Rec were the beneficiary, and yet the city were then to take action, we or possibly be the one to construct the trail, we would want to make sure that we had the rights and access to do that. Contrary, if the city was the exclusive beneficiary, we would want to make sure that the easement was constructed in a way that Parks and Rec would have that. So we'll construct the easement to make sure the purpose is there and not have it exclusively restricted to one agency or another. So we wouldn't necessarily assign rights, but we would construct the easement accordingly. So the benefit is the public, they're the ones with access. We would have a right to operate, maintain as needed. So we'll construct it as in order to make sure that the public has access. That's the beneficiary here, not necessarily an agency. So.
By construct the easement, you're talking about the language of the agreement, not necessarily the actual trail.
Correct. Construction of the easement is the legal document establishing the rights, not necessarily the physical infrastructure.
Got it. Thank you.
In the original application, housing was a significant portion of the proposal. By changing the zoning of this building, it could not be on the table anymore. Does this or does this not represent a significant change to the proposal?
I guess the change is the change. Whether you consider it to be significant that it's no longer 10 years is really up to you all. I think going back to the findings, and what we found is really important, and these are things that were drafted and that you adopted. Some of the excerpts talk about housing on the southern portion to be likely comprised in the form of multifamily. In order to address the density requirements, it wasn't permitted in R1 or R2 at the time, which is still true. That zone in place likely precluded the development of affordable housing on the subject, and then the quote is absolutely precluded any multifamily housing, quote, be it market rate or affordable. So, as proposed under the current zone, multifamily would still be permitted, was permitted, and the immediate departure from condo ownership, it's still true to the findings. So we acknowledge the market rate aspect of it. I don't think it represents a departure from the findings. The proposal to change from R1 to R2 included mixed use development, generally consistent with increasing the residential efficiency requirements of the comp plan as it creates opportunities to develop an increased diversity of housing product types, including an identified shortage of multifamily. It divides the cost and infrastructure, and the proposed zoning still clustered above the area redirected or restricts development outside the floodplain. That's still true. It's still true as it was in the original document. Back to the housing needs analysis, which you heard about earlier, the proposal to change the zone was found to be consistent with increasing the land efficiency of the needed housing supply with more multifamily dwelling units. The 2015 H&A reported that the city has a significant lack of multifamily housing. And increasing the efficiency and of use within the UGB, the strategy and basically acknowledges the city does not have enough land for multifamily in the R3 zone. However, allowing development in the C2 can be used to satisfy that. We're still consistent in that respect as modified. Outside of that, what I did was I looked at some other scenarios in town in order to, the concern here and some of the tension is if we allow these units to have short-term rentals, they're all going to be short-term rentals. I think what we want to look at is, looking at other users in town of similar size, 310 Oak Street, 14 dwelling units there, C2 zone, unrestricted short-term rental opportunity. Half those, 7 out of 14 are short-term rentals. Pasquale Barone, who was here earlier, did 6 townhouses, currently 6, working on more. Actually 2/3 of those are short-term rentals, unrestricted. Timbercrest townhomes, if you know what they're, probably a model that I think is very similar outside of downtown, maybe the core of our STR demand. 16 units, Country Club Road, 0 short-term rentals right now. So trying to look at what exposure does the city face if this is the case. And that's what's, in like users, similar circumstances, but for downtown, we see some absorption of these units, but not 100% loss. So with that in mind, with some of those findings and that acknowledgement, that's where you have my recommendation to allow the amendment.
Can you just refresh me on why the request is being made to amend it in that way, the units and the tenure thing specifically?
The change, why is the change being requested? Yeah, do we have applicant on? I'll let them speak on their own behalf. And I'll summarize my understanding too.
So can anyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So this is Rico. I'm the original kind of applicant. It all came about in a long drawn out process, but eventually what happened is we're digging through what it's going to cost to build a building in Hood River, and the costs are high. And we originally thought that we were going to build a long-term rental kind of project with half in a hotel use. And what happened is the bids we're getting for everything, even including demolition of the house, is 3 to 4 times what we had originally budgeted. We thought it would cost $40,000 to $50,000 to take down the house and clear some trees. And we're getting bids in the $100,000 to $120,000 range, which is, just crazy. So we're hedging everything at the moment. We cannot, building a for rent product was barely feasible financially for us, but we were willing to go down that road, knowing that we had a payoff in 10 years when we were going to convert to condos and sell. And after going through our ROMs with our contractors and getting the demo bids that we got, we're realizing that it is not feasible. So we have made the decision. I mean, it was a hard decision to go to Dustin and tell him that we can't fulfill that part of our agreement because that was a big part of our plan. And so we're completely happy with just land banking the land and figuring out if we go into a recession and maybe construction costs come down. And if that happens, then maybe the project becomes viable with the current conditions. Alternatively, if we go condos and, Ken, my partner, he built the townhomes on State and Oak, right? 8th and Oak, 9th and Oak. And those are probably some of the most desirable vacation rental potential units in Hood River. And 3 of them are vacation rentals and 3 of them are long-term. So we believe in our hearts that when this is all said and done, at most, half of them will be vacation rentals. and half will be long-term rentals or just whatever, not vacation rentals. And so I think in the spirit of everything, we're still fulfilling that expectation. We're definitely not in the downtown core, which makes it less viable to be a vacation rental. And I don't believe that Hood River has an ability to, completely create 50 vacation rentals on Brookside. I don't think that's viable. So I think in the long term, you're going to find out that this is a great project still. It's been increased in size because we've decided to do an underground parking garage, which allows for probably 47 to 50 units on this piece of land, which is much more dense, much more valuable to the city. We're asking you to let us go down this road. And if, again, like as I said previously, if you all decide that this is not a good thing for Hood River, we're totally fine with that. We have other things we're working on, and we're happy to focus on other things. But we think this is going to be a very valuable project to the city. We think it's going to be a great asset to the city. And we're chipping, things like this chip away at the housing deficit that the city has. And sometimes we don't get what we want, we get what we get. And so unfortunately, it was the hardest call I ever had when I told Dustin that this was happening. Because I had made a lot of promises, but in the end, the world is what it is. And we have to be able to build things that can be built. So that's where we're at.
Okay, thank you for that. And I just I was new to council, so I missed like all the history of this mostly. So it was going to be more of like, you were kind of going to run an apartment complex, kind of like long-term rental thing. And then in 10 years, you could sell them and short-term, but both. But you weren't going to, originally there was no selling of like nobody would own the condo things. Is that correct? I'm sorry.
The original proposal was that we were going to do 50-50 essentially long-term rentals and hotel use, which hotel use allows for short-term, less than 30-day rentals.
But the
And we were
long-term
going to
wouldn't
operate for
be,
10 years. And then after 10 years, we were going to convert to condos, or maybe 9 years, because it takes a while to convert to condos and then sell the units. That was the original plan. We have since gone through all of our models and determined that holding for 10 years is a loss leader. It doesn't work. So we
the
either
original
have to,
plan, nobody was going to purchase them initially. It was going to be.
not for 9 or 10 years, exactly.
And
Yep.
then if we don't approve this or whatever, you would still hold on to the land and revisit it if costs come down? Is that what you're saying?
Well, that would be the initial plan. I can't say what we would do if the site isn't rezoned. I mean, the land is not developable into multifamily. So in reality, no, we would not hold it. There's no value to build a multifamily building on the site that isn't zoned to build multifamily. So no, we would not hold. You would end up having a single family home built there, best case scenario.
I guess there's two parts, right? The rezoning and then there's the other part allowing the 10-year thing to go, right? Is that right, Dustin?
Well, the 10-year thing was a
All in one
condition of,
thing.
like you were going to condition onto our property that allowing the rezoning would require that. So,
Okay.
but in
and
the
now
end,
the
at R2 zoning, you're getting a 5,000 square foot lot, which is basically the top portion of that piece of land. So you're getting a single family home. Nothing else can be built there.
I guess my question to Dustin, this is just one thing that's doing all of that.
Yeah, and just to back up, the approval, there's never been an approval to establish that many units. So there was a concept that was considered of a hotel and really an illustrative, but I want to make sure that we never approved a hotel building. We never approved this. The parameters to the development were in here. So the parameters to the development were that it would be some sort of long-term, some sort of short-term, 50%. That's the sidebars that were put on it so that it wasn't a purely speculative outcome. So still would be zone C2, still have that. It would just be, I think your options here are allow them to park it and see what comes about into the future with those parameters on it, 50% or at least 10 in order to get some units out of it, or consider the amendment to where it would be still some sort of mixed use product to be likely condo. So.
And the other component of this that would be good for perhaps you to illustrate for all of us is how does the trail figure into this new situation if we don't approve this or we do?
Yeah, the trail is absolutely still locked in. I don't think there's been any consideration on how that the trail becomes off the table as probably the primary motivating factor here. So under any circumstance.
Yeah, and just for counselors in here, we've already consented and agreed to zone change. And I believe, if I understand correctly, what we're being asked is lifting 2 of those conditions off of the conditions that we placed when we did the zone change.
In the annexation agreement.
Yes.
So this is the zone change and the annexation have occurred.
Yeah.
You are bound, or you have a second layer here that this is the agreement. This becomes the operational agreement that we're now signing. So the 2 modifications, within your ordinance, it said you will approve an agreement in substantial conformance with what you have here. Now we're back to sign this agreement. They own the property. Here are the 2 parties. Here are the 2 amendments that are presented before you.
Grant?
Yes, Paul.
Thanks. I guess the analogy that's sticking in my mind is when this gentleman came to us a while back, I was kind of willing to go out on this limb and hope, love the trail and hope we would get what was described. Now I sort of feel the analogy is the person is saying, oh, just go a few more feet out on the limb. It'll be fine. Sorry, we didn't do what we said we would. And I'm not a developer and I understand things happen, but I'm feeling quite queasy about lifting more restrictions.
Doug.
So just looking at the recommendation of staff and seeing that annexation is a tool in which we can start to place conditions upon developments. It's one of the tools that we have to do that. I think Dustin did a really good job and the developers did a really good job of trying to work towards housing that we wanted, in this case. But being that the changes that they are, the housing needs analysis still says we need multifamily, right? So for me, it's not as desirable as, long-term housing, et cetera, but it still is desirable. And I can't place upon the developer the burden that, short-term rentals may or may not happen there. Certainly, I agree with the idea that they wouldn't happen like they would with Pasquale Barone's development, which will most certainly be all short-term rentals based on the location. If we were having a discussion about that, it might feel differently, being that this is out there and we have to sort of see, multifamily, what it'll be. We'll have to see, unless we decide that we don't want short-term rentals in commercial zones, which is a whole other different discussion. But, this is, to me, still desirable housing, multifamily. It's not the best opportunity. I think everybody took in good faith effort to do that, but this is a close second in my mind to develop multifamily housing. We need quite a bit of that, and also to get the trail, which is still securedness and whatnot. So generally in favor of it because of that, though would have liked the original agreement. I understand these things happen.
A quick follow-up on that. Yeah, so assuming we move through and lift that condition, what assurance do we have that these units would be housing? your mic's off.
That condition would be within it. You could stick with that, and I'm looking for the modification. So we could change that to say, still delivery of certain number of units. So you have 10, minimum 10. Actually, the code would require you a minimum of 20. Just to make the basic zoning requirements. Like C2 is the only zone that doesn't have a zoning ceiling. It has a zoning floor. Regardless of whatever annexation terms and agreements there, you would likely have to get 20 units out of it. 22, actually, 11 units per acre.
22 acre or 22 mixed or multifamily housing, you're talking housing units, correct?
22 dwelling units per
Dwelling
acre.
units, yeah, so there, because Grant, if I'm understanding your question, can these be turned into offices or something like that? This is a mixed use development project, but at least 22 of them will have to be multi.
You absolutely combine that.
Yeah, my question is more that they wouldn't necessarily be, if it's on C2, they wouldn't necessarily be full-term residents. They could, if my understanding is correct, entirely 100% be short-term rentals, correct?
Correct.
So we may, if we hypothetically move forward and lift this restriction, theoretically, you may have nobody actually living there. 100% of this building could theoretically be short-term rental.
That's correct.
Theoretic.
Which is our fault, in my opinion. We allow short-term rentals in C2 zones. We get density with C2. We don't want short-term rentals in there. We should change the rule and not allow short-term rentals. My opinion.
That's okay.
I am not sure of the specifics of the zoning differences, so but isn't there like a residential zoning that allows multifamily, and why are we not using that? And I mean, there was gonna be a hotel. If we're not doing the hotel thing, then could it be zoned as multifamily residential instead of commercial?
Yeah, there's no zone that a C2 would be your only mixed use zone. So initially it was mixed use, and I think it's still intended to be a mixed use product. So the only zone that allows commercial and multifamily in the same zone is C2 currently.
And what's the other, is it still the hotel idea, or is it different mixed use?
It's just mixed use at this point. I don't believe they're going to pursue hotel with this condo. So
maybe
some sort of commercial mixed use development.
Do we want to negotiate that, or is it just, I mean, I don't know, I'm just curious, maybe the applicant can speak to like what your ideas for the mixed use part is? Rico, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. I can speak to that. So the topography of the site, there's about 3/4 of an acre of level area on Brookside, and then it goes down pretty steep down to the Indian Creek bed. If we don't do a mixed use project, we can only build on 3/4 acres, which means we're limited by the amount of units that we can build. So if we go mixed use, we get an extra 10 feet, 45 feet max, because half of our site is 20 feet down towards the creek. So we're going to do an office use or maybe some type of, we don't know. We haven't figured it out. We're not submitting an application for a building right now. We're submitting an application for a rezone. That's what we're doing. So we have a concept of a condo building with a office or some type of commercial use on the bottom floor. And we are going to submit a pre-app for that sometime in the next few weeks. We were waiting for this meeting to go because we're just not going to pursue anything if this doesn't happen. So in the end, if it doesn't get rezoned, we're just, it's a single family home basically is what's going to be built there. So, and it's not going to be us that will do it. We'll sell it to someone, they'll figure it out and then do their thing. So we have to have the mixed use situation because of the topography of the lot. So if we don't get that, then you're going to get 20 units maybe, because we can't go for a third story is the deal. So that's the proposition that that we're looking at.
So it's like, you can't build a unit with a basement, the basement part needs to be an office, is that?
No, ground floor will be an office type situation. In the end, because the height restrictions is based on the lowest grade on the site, we're stuck with the lowest grade is 20 feet below the street. So in order to overcome that, we have to have an extra story, which means we have to go mixed use, which means to get the density to justify the construction on the site, which means probably 47 units is our current plan. We have to go 3 stories above the street elevation. So that's what we're proposing.
And does the
That's what we
47
will propose when we come in for pre-app.
And the
once this-
47 units is including the offices, not just housing?
No, that's independent of the commercial portion.
Okay.
Enrico, maybe you can answer this question for me. Echoing the mayor's comments. One concern is council may feel like Charlie Brown trying to kick the football and Lucy just, yanked it out. Can you maybe help us not feel that way?
Definitely I can. So we came in, we thought we were going to build a 30-unit building with half hotel and half long-term. We have since decided that going condo, we can go a little bit bigger because our parking is fixed, but underground parking costs a lot of money to do. And so distributing that across the units, if we go underground parking, we can get, I think, an 80 space parking garage, which is partially subterranean. And then if we can go 3 stories, kind of 2 stories, it's going to be a building you'd find in San Francisco, essentially, like that kind of feel where there's 2, 3-story buildings with apartments centrally loaded. We think we can get 47 to 50 units on that, on top of the parking garage. And so by digging down and biting the bullet, we think we can go denser. And so that was the thought. That is the thought. And that is the impetus of it all. Like a 30-unit building with 10 like the site is not conducive to an apartment building. And so we had tandem parking, which limited our ability to build a denser project. And it just didn't feel right. It didn't feel right. And then we started getting the bids from everyone about what it was going to cost to build this thing. And there's no way anyone's going to build it and rent it. So we came to the conclusion and, kind of bit our tongues and told Dustin, we can't do what we said we were going to do. We're going to do this other thing. And in the end, it's a lot of it's more housing units, which I feel is a positive for the city. It's not what I originally envisioned for the site, but I think it's actually a better use for the site, to be quite honest, because I don't think 30 rentals out there is valuable. I think 47 or 50 condos is much more valuable because you're going to get a half and half. Like I said, I own one of the townhomes at 8th and Oak. And those are the most desirable rentals in all of Hood River, in my opinion. And half of them are long-term and half of them are short-term. And we're talking a project out by the golf course, which is not as desirable. And I think we're going to get at least the same ratios, but we'll see. And we're targeting a price point where the 1 bedrooms will sell for $650,000 to $700,000, and the 2 bedrooms, which is as big as we're going to go, will sell for $850,000 to $900,000, which is very attainable for a double income family in Hood River. So I don't think we're building extremely high end. We're not creating extremely high end condos. We're creating condos and we're creating housing. So.
Okay, if that is your argument, it bothers me that you're coming back to us now as opposed to originally coming to us before, with that as at least a potential option. So that's just my 2 cents about it. Anybody else have any additional questions?
Well, I have a comment. I'm inclined to agree with kind of Paul's statement, and that this was a contentious development when it was brought before council, and there was some, a lot of different input that we got from the community, and we kind of, I agree, kind of went out on a limb on this a little bit, and the spirit of this feels different to me. Having that, I understand that not all of these would, there's no guarantee that all of them are going to be STRs necessarily, but you remove that condition and then, they could be. And I know that absolutely multifamily housing is needed in Hood River, but what isn't needed in Hood River are more STRs. And I understand that, like, obviously that was going to be, the case after like 10 years, but I feel like that 10 years, like, gives you some time to build more housing in the community to, hopefully that we would have been in a better state at that point. So, this is really challenging. It's, not insinuating that the, applicant, had this planned all along or anything like that, but it just, it's just really unfortunate that this is happening. I don't feel very good about it.
I have to say that I think we were all encouraged that anything could happen on that property. And I commend the applicant for at least, trying. And I appreciate that, these harsh realities come up. And it's surprising to me to think that, anybody might be able to afford a $650,000 or $800,000 condo. That price point seems really, really high. But we're also thinking, we're at a stage right now thinking about what can potentially be done on this property. We're right now just thinking about the annexation piece of it, and the rezone has occurred already, correct? Or it's already been approved, right, Dustin?
That's correct.
Yeah. So, I mean, another thing that we're talking about here is, and I want to choose my words carefully because there is a fine line between accommodating too much development and then also just making it impossible for anybody who wants to do something proactive and positive for our city. And I think that we've got citizens of our city that have invested in trying to do something positive here, in trying to provide multifamily housing for us. And it's a tough pill to swallow, but there's so many uncertainties about the future and, the economy and what's happening right now that there's a part of me that says, I believe in these guys. I believe that they've gotten it this far, and I think we should give them a chance to try to build something for us because we haven't had, I think the memo says that we haven't had a multifamily housing development in over 20 years in our community. I'd like to see what they can do. I think it could be positive. And the further we kick this can down the road, just the more expensive it's going to end up being.
Councilor DePiero.
Thank you. Yeah, similar thinking to Councilor Cavalieri. I mean, this property's been sitting there forever. I would rather have long-term, more affordable housing on that property. We took that shot as Dustin, negotiated this and in good faith, they tried to meet that. I I'd rather have multifamily and a trail there than nothing at all. And unfortunately, I wish somebody else could maybe give me a better proposal for something else that's going to happen there. As the applicant has, stated many times, it's a challenging piece of property. If you've seen it, it's a giant hill and, a bunch of stuff going on there that's going to be difficult. And they're looking for creative ways to develop upon it. That's all fine and good. It's still, it's expensive housing, which is, market rate and defined by the market, not by them. But it's also, it's going to be condos, density. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for opportunities to rezone for density. The market will do what it does, but the most thing that, and this gives us a once in a generation sort of opportunity for that trail, right? So I'm trying to weigh that with the greater good versus nothing being developed there at all, because I don't believe there will be anything developed there unless something like this keeps being refined, because it's a challenging parcel.
Any further questions, comments, or deliberation?
I have none. I'll just make the motion to approve the Brookside annexation agreement as amended.
Second it.
There's a motion and a second. Any discussion?
I know it doesn't do any good, but I just want to say I wish that it wasn't so expensive. That's all. It's like, it's just, yeah, it's really hard for me to swallow that part of it, like a 2-bedroom for 900,000.
Grant,
Housing is important in all capacities, I guess.
Not
Grant?
for STRs, in my opinion.
Yeah, Paul.
I want to understand the motion was so brief as amended, meaning if we vote yes on this, we're changing the restrictions. Help me understand.
Yeah, the motion is to remove the 2 restrictions as presented in our packet. Correct, Anna?
No,
No.
we're moving the dedication to the city, correct, Dustin? We're amending the annexation agreement so that in section 6, let's see, demolition can occur. So we're not removing the requirement for the trail easement or the utilities easement. We're just saying that they can go ahead and demolish the house that is existing there. And then number 7 is that they will no longer have the requirement to have long-term rental dwellings. A number of 10 long-term dwelling units, long-term rental dwelling units as part of the condition for 10 years. So the amendment is those 2, section 6 and section 7 of the annexation agreement.
Yeah,
it's the bottom of page 218.
Thank you. I understand. So my argument is the same. I'm going to vote no on that motion.
Okay. I'll call the motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Nay.
Chair votes nay. 3.
Tie.
Yeah, means it doesn't go forward.
Oh, do you have another motion?
Yep, we can make more motions if we wish. The alternative is to move forward with this as originally drafted, as we originally talked about in the past, which has those 2 in there. We could talk about removing one of those, both of those, either of those, none of those conditions. So, yes.
I'm curious to know if Mayor Blackburn had a recommended or a different motion in mind that was more palatable.
Thank you, Doug. I don't. My metaphor about the tree branches is quite earnest. That the question a month ago was, can we imagine this? And I said, yeah, I can imagine that. And now they're saying, we can't do that. How about this other thing? And I say, yeah, I don't like that other thing. I do not have something that I would be satisfied with. And as somebody said, I feel for them, but they own it and we get the trail easement and I'm happy about that.
I wonder if Rico can tell us if the requirement was reduced from 10 units for a long-term dwelling to 5. Would that help at all?
I've spoken to my investors and they're not willing to do that, so.
That's just Davina.
We
And
like I think in this world, we take what we can get, and sometimes a 50-unit multifamily building in a city where no one's building multifamily is valuable. And I like the rents relative to the sales prices, relative to the construction costs, they don't equate in Hood River. That's why nobody is building this stuff in Hood River. That's why. It doesn't, the equation doesn't equal. So you're going to end up with no units every single time if you limit what the developer can do with the land that they have. Your zoning code is specifically set up to create opportunity for developers to do what they can do. And if you create extra restrictions above and beyond the zoning code, you're going to get a bunch more of the same, which is nobody's building multifamily units in your town because it's too expensive to build and the rents don't justify the expense to build. That's where we're at. So, you know, like you said, how long has it been since someone built a multifamily building in Hood River? It's been a long time. And it's not because no one loves Hood River. Everyone loves Hood River. It's because the rents don't justify the construction costs. And so you're stuck in a world where nobody's willing to invest. If you restrict everyone's ability to build what they think they can build, you're not going to get any multifamily buildings. You just aren't. It's a big investment. So you're talking, people are running numbers. It's not a house. Nobody's going, I want to live in Hood River and I love Hood River and I'm going to spend a bunch of money on a house in Hood River. These are, we're going to build a bunch of apartment units in Hood River and we're going to sell them and we're going to make this much return. And can we justify the investment and the risk associated with doing that over a long period of time? And in the end, that's what we're trying to do. That's my response.
Grant,
Yes, Mayor.
I think we have decided. I would suggest we move on to our next topic.
Yep, if there's no additional motions to be made by anyone. Yep.
Just a point of clarification, something the mayor said prior to the statement by the applicant. Dustin, if they vacate this, any guarantee the trail will ever be built?
Yeah, I think we have the trail under the current arrangement. I don't know if you have any guarantee that anything else will be built, but certainly the trail is part of the onset. So,
and make sure I want to understand this correctly. So, the easement at this point is post any activity, though, correct?
Pre-activity.
Pre-activity?
As written right now.
So as written right now and what we've already passed, the trail is
pre-activity.
Pre-activity went with the zoning. Whoever owns it next is beholden to that, et cetera.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
I don't think we should move on quite yet. I mean, I think that there's still a possibility we could figure out something here. I think that, you know, the motion that was presented to us and the information in the packet, we only have the one issue, and that's with the revised paragraph 7, and that's the requirement of, you know, maintaining long-term rental dwelling units for 10 years. If we as a council can come up with a way that we can get around that piece, because we don't care that house actually, I mean, that's another favor they're going to be doing us, is demolishing that house. It's not a good thing to have on that property. It's an old house that's got some other issues. And I think that there were some inhabitants at some point that I think it's not a particularly safe thing. So they will be doing us a favor if we let them move forward with the amendment as proposed in section 6. What we really just need to hammer out is number 7. And I don't want to give up on that. I think that we have some difficult decisions to make here, but I think we should try to carry on with that and figure out something that will work for our city council before we just say, I'm sorry, you're stuck with the agreement as we initially gave it to you, because that the result of that is going to be, and please correct me if I'm wrong, Rico, but I think that it's this isn't going to be a viable project, and the likelihood is you'll have to end up either land banking or selling the property.
I don't know what it means, but I can tell you what it means right now, which is it's not viable to do a rental product right now in Hood River. So it might be in a couple years or 5 years or whenever the economy tanks and construction costs come down. I don't know. So I can't speak to that. I'm saying we want to break ground in a year or year and a half with a condo project in Hood River. And if it's going to be a rental project, I can't speak to when that will happen. So.
And it sounds like if you were to make a motion, it would be to maybe move on item number 6, but retain item number 7, hypothetically.
Do we want to do that?
It's up to you.
I agree with you, Anna. Like, I think that most of us haven't brought up any issues with the part 6 part, so I am good with approving that amendment. I don't know if we can figure out a whole new plan right now for, alternatives. I don't know if that's something that can be negotiated more in the future. We revisit it. I don't know how that looks, but
Or do
we sit here and hash it out?
Would you like to make such a motion?
Yes. I move that we approve the Brookside annexation agreement as amended in section 6, but not 7.
I'll set it. That.
Grant?
There is thanks, B. There is a motion and a second to approve the Brookside annexation agreement as amended to accept the amendment for item number 6, but retain item number 7 in the original agreement.
Grant?
Any discussion? Yeah, Paul.
I am not opposed to this. I don't have a lot of confidence that the applicant would be amenable to this. My inclination would be to let staff and the applicant work it out a little bit more and then come back to us with another suggestion.
Councilor Spina.
I'll just say that, I think the mayor is correct. I think that there should be some more discussion. I'm not sure the applicant will have anything, but that's, agree with what he said, that with both of these gone, or with one of these gone, this would not do much for development. So if we're going to try to do something else, let's try to do something else and bring it back to council. I agree.
Yep. So if we're in agreement for staff to go back and work on this some more, we can let the motion die and go on from there. So I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Hey. I'm sorry.
The
motion that she made.
The motion on the table is presented by Councilor Cavalieri. Go.
To what?
To allow the city-
There's a number of things
Yeah.
flying around here, gone back and forth on this.
And renegotiate number 7. And so, but then if that dies,
Renegotiate. No.
not pass number 7.
The motion was to allow them to make modifications on item 6 as proposed, but for us to retain the original item number 7 as originally agreed to. Yes.
That wasn't the motion. It was number 6. Wait, it was your motion, Amanda.
That's why I restated it. Check.
But, okay, yes, it was to not change 7, but that doesn't mean that we can't keep working in that direction, right? If we amend one part. I don't know. I just, if they want to demolish
Okay.
like the building, why would we hold them up on that?
Otherwise, we can all vote, or we can vote no, and it kills this motion and we all move on.
I think our planning director might have some
Yeah.
comments on this.
Think in terms of process, a vote no would have the motion die. Which that motion, as stated, was to accept this with 6 intact, or 6 is modified and 7 retained intact. During discussion, Mayor mentioned an alternative saying may not be, that motion may not be something supportable by the applicant. Maybe let it die. Suggested maybe let it die and allow us time. So a vote no here would allow the motion to die. Staff would then possibly hear another motion to send us back to do some homework with the applicant.
Chair votes nay. Is there another motion?
I move that the city planning director and staff work with the applicant to bring together an alternative option, should there be one found, to city council.
Second. There is a motion and a second to take this back to staff and work with the applicant some more.
Grant,
Yes, Paul.
that sounds like a good idea to me. I will vote for that motion.
Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Chair votes aye. Back in staff's hands.
Thank you, Chair. We'll be back with an alternative for you.
Thanks. Okay, this is a question for council. Are we good to keep going, or do we want to take a little break? No, we have a couple of things.
You have an executive session.
We have,
right
we have,
after.
we have a few things, yeah.
You can also choose to delay this topic if you wish.
Nah.
Keep going.
So yeah, are we comfortable still going? Good, good. All right, still going. Next up, discussion items on industrial street parking. Abigail.
Thank you, council. This is the first time that you as a group have discussed this question, although I have met with some of you and have shared a little bit of a study that we did last fall. So we are talking about Industrial Street and possibly 7th, a piece of 7th that is not metered. The city has a parking study that has an 85% rule. When 85% of capacity has been reached at peak times, then recommend that you consider more intensive or aggressive management of that parking area. So that's really the question I bring to you today is, do you wish to implement or investigate more intensive parking management strategies on Industrial Street and or on 7th? Note that you received written comments from Full Sail, from Mr. Barone, from Mrs. Barone, and then of course you saw him in person today. So just to have that all noted. And we'll also note, we talked to, and Councilor Stupina can maybe talk about this, the Visit Hood River was consulted. I don't think they had strong feelings one way or the other. We did not ask them for official feedback today, but they have been consulted earlier.
Any questions? Anna.
Sorry. I'm curious how much of the, parking congestion that is occurring on that street currently is related to the construction that's happening there and would be therefore temporary. I drove to pick up lunch the other day and I had to drive on the wrong side of the street because of all the cars that were parked in front of it appeared to be primarily construction vehicles that parked directly in front of the building.
And I believe that is actually yellow curved, right? Like that is not actually parking.
I have a lot to say on this. So spent a few years down there in that exact location. That is an extremely unsafe condition that's down there. I've almost been hit by several cars. It's all the construction vehicles treating that street like they're parking. I'm not sure if that's legal or not. If it was permitted, I did ask at some point of staff if it was, because sometimes you can get permits, right, to be able to park in spaces like that, but yeah, that's that's all the construction vehicles that are there, absolutely.
You're talking about in front of the construction, in front of the Union Building.
Right,
Or
the
the,
northbound, or the, I'm sorry, the lane on the north side of industrial is a parking lot.
Yeah. All the construction vehicles.
yeah, and those were not part of our study because those are not marked parking spots.
So the portion that is being proposed to be metered are the parking spaces that are along the north side between the industrial building and Big Seven.
Right, the diagonal spots and then a couple parallel in front of Big Seven. And then on the south side, there are also, those are parallel park, I believe they're parallel parking. I'm looking to the chief of, on the side closest to Full Sail and Industrial, those are, yes. Yeah, those are also part of the consideration.
If you recall, when we were
You wanna come up and, thank you, chief, I appreciate your,
This is what I was just thinking.
this is a team effort for sure.
When you and I went down and kind of reviewed it as we went to
Yeah.
Full Sail, I remember we had the makeshift signs that were placed on the trees for construction parking.
Yes.
Yeah, no parking because of construction,
Right.
so.
Not of
So I don't
our
recall
font.
yellow, but I remember the little signs that were not our signs,
Yeah,
so.
someone was very creative with their sign making.
Man.
I am just noticing, that this is also very close to the underused parking lot that we have across from Wholesale, so. I don't know, I don't have any, like, I'm not drawing any conclusions about that, but it's just interesting, like, we have all this parking that's not being used and it's a block away, so. I don't know how.
Right, and I think we've kept the rate of the Columbia lot fairly low because it is, yeah, because it is not actively not used by a lot.
And you can park in there by the hour too, right? It's not,
I believe so. I think so.
I don't have any questions, I have comments, I wanna make Abigail stand up there and listen to my comments.
That's why we are here for a public conversation. This is a discussion item, so we can discuss. So I don't have any more information to present to you. You have we did a short study in October. And so at which point we realized that industrial hits the peak capacity or over 85%, couple, fairly consistently. We did that in October. That was definitely not what we consider prime time. The prime time, I'm gonna guess, is probably summer. So that's why we bring the topic to you. 7th only hit capacity on one day. That was a Saturday morning. I assume that's probably connected to the farmers market. So those are the data points we bring to you. And then Chief and I met with folks from Full Sail last week or 2 weeks ago. We did not get a chance to meet with Tofurky, but we have communicated with them. They know that we were talking about this tonight.
And we did have a conversation about the city parking lot, and the price is the $25. HR there was a little concerned about, their employees based on wage and the extra cost. So that was mentioned.
And any questions from you, Paul, online?
I'm with Doug. I have some comments, but not questions.
Okay.
Well, I guess my question is, well, regarding your comment about the employees being concerned about, okay, I think I understand, sorry. Not only would metering be a cost, if we do meter using the parking, I was thinking the parking lot would be more for the concern that like Pasquale brought to us of like his people not having parking to get to the offices in the Union Building. Well, the parking lot's not far from the Union Building was my thinking about that, but you're talking more like people who work in Full Sail and Tofurky.
Yeah, the majority of the people that park there are the workers, they do shift work 24/7, those buildings run, so
And
not
if
as many at
we-
night, but.
Right, if we
Majority's
meter
there.
that, then they're gonna have to park somewhere else.
Well, they'll either choose
Pay
to park there and pay, or they have the opportunity to pay the $25 monthly fee for the city parking lot in Columbia. So,
But I'm assuming if we meter that, there would also be a time limit as well, so.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I would note, I think Mr. Barone also in his written comments to you says he's concerned about future customers. As he develops his building, he has more customers and that their inability to find a parking spot. Less about the workers, because I think he actually has some parking available for, at least for the condos, they are required to have some parking. So that was my impression from his
Not for the
message,
business.
not the businesses.
Any additional questions? All right, we'll move into comments and deliberations. Councilor Stupina.
Right. So I spent every day down here in this exact spot for a few years, right? Subletting space in the underground music station. Intimately involved, aware of the comings and goings of all the cars. I was there when we put up our signs for, 1 hour parking for those like, that weren't around at the time. When GorgeNet was bought and it became Blue Mountain, their CEO came to us and said there's not enough temporary parking. So at that time, 6 to 8 spots were turned into 1 hour parking. So down there was a bunch of 1 hour parking right next to the building that Pasquale owns, right? So this is like, there's like a newer like wellness center that's in there. There's a law firm that's there. Pottery Studio had been there for a long time. Underground music station, very sparsely used at this point. So it's, his concerns, I think about future development and whatnot.
Councilor Stupina, can I note on that? I think you said the spots closest to Mr. Barone's property. I think those have actually been 2 hours or 1 hour for a long time. The change we made.
Oh, they were
when-
meters though, right? They were meters, then they became.
I'm not sure about that, but the change we made at the request of Blue Mountain were actually directly in front of the Big Seven building. So that's where we added the 1 hour parking.
But I think the ones before
that?
that were meters. So
Oh,
what we
okay.
did
I
was
think
we
that
changed
predates
those
me.
from meters to 1 hour, and then we added the ones in front of where you're talking about.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Um,
Sorry about that.
yeah, I guess I wasn't clear about that either. So yeah, more or less, every day I'd go down there, probably get there around 7:30 in the morning. The parking is gone. 100%, that's true. It's gone. Sometimes I'd have to park on 7th. Walk down the hill a little bit, right? Like not a huge inconvenience, not amazing. I'd like to park right in front of it, but like, the parking definitely gone every single day. I'm in a bit conflict with this because it's pretty clear like what we should do, 85% whatnot. Literally every person that parks there is a low wage industrial worker, busting their hide to make money for their family, going back up to the valley. Essentially what we'd be doing is taking that money, out of their pocket. Or, I mean, I know people have been asking for parking down there that were in Clay Commons and Underground Music Station for years. For future development for this, it's like it finally came up. I think I don't love that because it's been like that for a long time, but those workers really depend on that parking, right? I was more than willing to ride my bicycle down there every single day, do that sort of thing and not complain about it for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of days, right? So I want to keep that for the industrial workers. I agree with the email that we got from Full Sail. I know this is in conflict with what we should be doing. I think we should have a conversation about that, but I think about the cities like Vail all the time that can't get people to work in them, right? Because every little bit that you do that goes onto the worker is making it harder to work here. They'll go work somewhere else. And then all of a sudden we want to have people to, clean the kitchens. And I mean, these are tough jobs that these people are doing. No one's going to want to do them that live here, in, Cushy Hood River. So it presents a larger problem about, parking that we have. Can we do, based on income qualification or something like spitballing? I don't know, like, grant something, but I don't want to discourage or take away the last parking that our low wage workers or people showing up at 3 in the morning, working at Full Sail, Tofurkey, cleaning up all the restaurants. It's the last place they have to park. So I understand it's in conflict with what we usually do and what we should be doing. Let's take a look at it and try to figure out something else for low wage earners so they can retain parking. Versus just no one will park there. There's certainly not enough businesses that are in that area in the Union Building to require all of that parking. No one else really knows that's down. Right? So I don't want to take away a bunch of hardworking people's spots for a few people to have a space when something is eventually developed there.
I will say a couple of things on that statement. Parking is only from 8 to 6, so everybody after 6 p. park where you shall. Also, I'll make it public that when we talked to Full Sail, the Cora? Corina, she stated that, if this is something that we're looking to go to as a city, they might do a private agreement with the people that own the Wacoma building because they have a very large parking lot on both sides that's available. So again, they're looking after their employees that they could do some kind of secondary parking off the city streets onto those private parking spots there. Which part of that study was working with private owners of property and parking lots to accommodate that.
Thank you for that context. And, personally would be more amicable to approve something like this personally if that was worked out beforehand versus, afterwards. It would be, unless you poke the bear, are they going to do it? Like that's a whole nother discussion. But, I in good faith would want to have discussions with the employers, with the Downtown Business Association, Tofurkey, Turtle Island Foods, and who I understand have also had some more movement down to their other building that has parking. But I want to have something in play, some sort of plans before taking away those people's parking.
Does the port own that property, the Wacoma building? Are they still owners of the Wacoma?
No.
They own the Big Seven building.
Okay. So the Wacoma building is now owned.
It's privately owned.
And there's plenty of parking there. And also just looking at this exhibit that Pasquale provided to us, the Elks parking lot is directly across from the majority of the building or the businesses that are in the Union building. And that I was kind of thinking along the same lines of, potentially some of these businesses could negotiate reserved parking for their customers. And I believe the Elks lot is primarily used in the evening, so they have events and stuff like that. I don't know if it's super full all the time, but I kind of feel the same way. So it might make more sense to see if there are options or alternatives for parking for some of these businesses elsewhere, as opposed to like really quick. I remember paying metered parking down there before in the past, but I don't know that it's that urgent if these other options haven't already been explored.
Thank you, Counselor. I guess one point of clarification, would you be looking for staff to negotiate those kind of agreements, or just we want to make sure that Full Sail and other employers have time to find alternatives before taking any kind of action? I'm not sure what the direction there is.
I don't think staff needs to negotiate those. I would potentially go to the proponents of installing metered parking there and ask them if those steps have already been taken. Just really, they should be the ones, or their tenants should be the ones that are, or their employees, or those are the people that should maybe be looking at parking options.
Got it. So not those big employers, but Mr. Brown and others who might be having the concerns.
Grant?
Free parking sure is expensive.
Grant?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yes, Paul.
Thanks, you guys, for the thoughtful pondering about it. It's such a challenging question. I am a little bit more willing to stick to our current plan, which, as I understand it, is when it hits 85%, we take a look. We took a look. We're proposing metering an additional part of our downtown. I agree that free parking is very expensive. There's a 750-page book called "There's No Such Thing as Free Parking." I think that the economics do a pretty good job of shaping behavior. I'd be willing to put these meters in and observe how the marketplace shifts things around. And in 6 months, maybe we decide that was a terrible move. But there's a number of solutions that I don't think it's our job to find. We are in charge of providing a system that makes people use wise use of our valuable property, which is the parking spaces. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I have mixed feelings about this. On the one hand, I feel like, it's kind of subsidizing a business where if there's low wage workers, they should be paid better. There's also the lot across the street. It was mentioned, I believe, just in a recent conversation, it was mentioned it's $25 a month. On the other hand, I kind of don't like that this was complaint driven in this particular one and not happen organically. I think that's kind of not very nice for food. But I understand it. But also too, I very much agree with Doug's point that I think this is a particularly unique spot in Hood River in terms of the kinds of parking, just the location, and not particularly visible. And the fact that this, the point in time survey, whatever, was done in October and that it was filled does very much indicate that it is workers and not, like tourists that are utilizing it. And, the way things are right now, this is not something that we're, like required to do. It's just that we look at it. And, I think this is a terrible time to be adding more to the struggles of workers. So I am inclined to let this sit for a while and not act on this right now.
Yeah, I understand my fellow councilors' perspective about it. I often, if we make any changes, it I hate the phrase, trickles down to those who can afford it the least and have the least opportunity to let their voice be heard. Economically, behavioral, if we choose to meter this space, I would expect that parking would shift over off of Wasco Street, Columbia, and move over into the residential areas where it's not metered. And people would walk the half block over to Full Sail in Full Sail's explicit example. As a number of the employees that work downtown generally do currently who don't have parking. And if we're explicitly following the decisions of the past parking study and following those recommendations, this wouldn't be necessarily a discretionary decision that we'd be making. Is there room or ability amongst the rest of council to I understand the topography and the restrictions and the lay of the land down there and how much that space is utilized for employees and workers as opposed to people generally visiting the area. Would it be feasible to use a portion or partition of that area and meter part of it while keeping the other part of it still free to use? For example, if we take a third and put the Cali machine right at the end of it and say, hey, pay on this side of it, would that be a workable solution? Understanding that at some point in the future, the city may become busier. We may have to eventually, not today, meter the rest of the spaces, but at least the infrastructure would be in place for that potential day in the future. Is there feedback on that as a concept? And that doesn't have to be a decision for the day either. That's the ideas in front of us. Yes.
It's full by 7 in the morning, full of industrial workers, and I don't know where else they're gonna go. We take away a third. And whatnot, so personally wouldn't be in favor of it.
I agree. I don't think we should just be part of it. I don't see really what that accomplishes besides taking a few spots away from people who are using it and need it. I agree with Ben. I'm not really wanting to do anything at this moment. I don't know, it seems like from some comments, it's like more like we're worried about like future access to what will be there. And I just have this, it's like kind of overall annoyance with people expecting to get front row parking of the places they're going. You can walk a block or two, like you don't, I mean, there's parking in Hood. I mean, I know it's a big thing, but it's gonna be somewhere within a couple block radius, you're gonna be able to find a spot, so, I don't know, that's just one of my.
And I agree with that. It's, you know, I mean, the people parking there need to park there all day for work. People that were coming down there to like go to a business down there, you know, there are 1 hour parking spaces. Those businesses are not massive. It does feel very like I want to ensure that my few customers, you know, get to have parking anytime that they want at the expense of all these industrial people. So the industrial workers, they have to park there all day. So to me, it is kind of like a, you know, there are places to park. You can park, like, to go down to those businesses, there's, you know, or if those businesses, you know, that have a little bit of requirement, you know, wanted to work with the Wacoma Center or something like that. It's not a far walk from, you know, some of these businesses that are there. Certainly there's the staircase that goes down there, you know, from Fourth and whatnot, where you can, there's usually parking available right there. You know, in front of there for people that want to, you know, go to a business that's not an industrial for an hour. You know what I mean? Like, I agree with that.
Any other comments? Good.
Can I summarize what I think I heard? I definitely heard at least 3 people say not now. I definitely heard the mayor say yes, like in favor of it. So I'm not sure I heard a majority saying not now. I heard at least 3 not nows.
I'll throw my hat into the not now pile.
Okay. Great, that gives me to, you know, this is not a vote, but I do need to count, like, I don't feel like I got 4 people who said not now, and therefore I'm not planning to take any further action on this topic at this time. And we can communicate that back to Mr. Brown and to Full Sail and to others.
Abigail?
Yes. Oops, sorry.
Sorry, Grant, I'll chime in on, if we say not now, I don't want that to come with homework for Abigail.
Right. That's how I took it. It was, I'm crossing this off my list until someone either comes back to council and asks for it, or council, you know, in a council comment, someone says, gosh, I want to investigate this again, and 3 others agree.
Yeah, I think that's correct. I don't think we were, I mean, as I understood it, we're not saying this is done forever and we're never gonna revisit it, and that this would be, you know, free parking in perpetuity, just that, not at this time.
Yep. But I'm not going to bring you anything further until you ask for it.
Sounds good.
Okay, thank you for that clear direction. I appreciate that.
No direction, no homework. Class dismissed. Okay. No, we're not going anywhere yet. We got stuff to do. Oh, where are we? City Recorder, Jen.
Try to make this quick here. Your Honor, I'd like to entertain a motion for the first reading ordinance 2090 by title only.
Do I get pretend to be Your Honor?
You'll vote last.
So moved.
Seconded.
There's a motion and a second to read ordinance number 2090 for the first time by title only.
Counselor Mitchell.
Aye.
Counselor Stupina.
Yes.
Counselor Keiki.
Aye.
Counselor Cavalieri.
Aye.
Mayor.
Aye.
Counselor Polson.
Aye.
Ordinance 2090, an ordinance amending Title 9, Public Peace, Morals and Welfare, Chapter 9.36, Weapons and Fireworks, Section 9.36.025, limitations on the sale and discharge of consumer fireworks of the Hood River Municipal Code, limiting use of consumer fireworks in the city to the period 6 p.m. December 31st to 1 a.m. January 1st each year, and prohibiting the sale of fireworks at all times. So we'll do the second reading at the next meeting. Hang on one second, multitasking here. Your Honor, I'd like to entertain a motion for the first reading of ordinance 2091 by title only.
So moved. Motion and second to read ordinance 2091 for the first time by title only.
Counselor Stabina,
Aye.
Counselor Cavallari,
Aye.
Counselor Mitchell,
Aye.
Counselor Gaki,
Aye.
Mayor,
Aye.
Counselor Polson.
Aye.
Ordinance 2091, an ordinance repealing in its entirety Title V, Business Taxes, Licenses and Regulations, Chapter 5.20, Taxi Cabs of the Hood River Municipal Code, adopting a new Title V, Business Taxes, License and Regulations, Chapter 5.20, Vehicles for Hire, to allow and regulate transportation network companies in addition to transportation or traditional taxi cabs and pedicabs. Second reading in 2 weeks.
Thanks. City manager comments.
Thank you, sorry. Moment there where I was like, is it really 2 weeks or is it 3 weeks? Because
Oh, yes.
next week is the 5th Monday, meaning we have no council business ahead of time. So enjoy your extra week of between council meetings. I was just taking quick notes to make sure that I've got all my follow-up items. I think like I said, Gord Transit had hoped to show a video, so I'm gonna send that link to you. Taxi code, we're gonna investigate with Scott Rainier on the insurance requirements and make sure that you've got that information for the second reading next time. Send that out to you as soon as we've got that information and share that also with the taxi cab folks and the other stakeholders. And then staff are going to work with the owner of the Brookside property and see if we can bring something new back to you on that. My only other comment, well, one is we city staff will be working on budgets this week. Departments will be presenting their budgets to me and we'll be working along. And so looking forward to bringing you a budget in late April, early May. So make sure that you've got your Wednesdays free because it's going to be an awesome time. And then finally, I want to thank those of you who were able to attend our training with Lou Raja last week. It was, I think it's so great when our leadership shows up and is present, and I really appreciate it. I hope that you had a good experience. For those of you who were unable to make it, we did film it. We filmed the staff one, not the leadership one. So we'll be able to share that with you, but just want to thank you for being there. I think Dan wanted to use this opportunity to piggyback onto the city manager comment. So I'll call on him to see what he has to say, that he's going to say publicly before we have an executive session.
Hi, thanks, Abigail. Yeah, there are two items tonight related to the federal litigation we have, the challenge to your short-term rental regulations. We have a new settlement offer dated the 18th of this month, and that's the subject of the executive session. But also the federal court held hearing argument on Friday, cross motions for summary judgment. Motion for summary judgment is basically that there are no disputed facts, that the case can be decided based on the law. And I don't think there are any disputed facts in this case, so I think it is eligible for a legal determination by the court. And there were cross motions for summary judgment, and I just want to kind of give a few observations from that argument. The mayor was there, Abigail was there live, Dustin was there live, and Will Norris was there in the courtroom, which was good because it indicated the importance of this case and the importance of your short-term rental regulations to the city council. If you remember, we recently amended the ordinance to make it more like Santa Monica's, which has been upheld by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals under a Commerce Clause challenge. And so what that amendment we did requires is that to get a short-term rental license, the property has to be a long-term residence, either for the owner or for someone. And in order to check that box, you've got to produce a 12-month lease. I don't think that we as staff had any particular strong feeling about 12 months, but long-term tenancy is defined as anything over 30 days. And because this is a 12-month license, we didn't want a licensee to only get like a 6-month STR license or have to come back halfway through. They can validate a whole year of residency just by showing us a 12-month lease. That was the rationale behind that requirement. So anyhow, the interesting thing is the argument started out from the plaintiffs, a takings argument that the city has taken valuable property right by requiring a residency, a long-term residency in the property. And the reason that's interesting is because the ordinance itself, when it was adopted in 2016, required, it had an option in the ordinance that if anyone felt that a 7-year amortization was not sufficient compensation, they had to specifically request additional compensation, give the city a chance to consider what their arguments were and what additional compensation would be needed. And no one pushed that button. No one applied for additional compensation, and the door closed after 5 years under the statute that they would be applying for. So takings was not pled in this lawsuit, and it's not really available. I was shocked that the plaintiffs are going back to that. It's not an option because no one took advantage of the city's additional compensation option. Federal law says you have to take advantage of any available local remedies. They didn't do so. Therefore, no takings claim would be, they failed to exhaust local remedies, and so no takings claim would be ripe for adjudication. So it's strange that they would open with that argument. The second thing was the plaintiffs, one of the beefs they appear to have under this tweak that you made is that now the owners, out-of-state owners, can't come and visit their own homes while they have a short-term rental license, because with a 12-month lease, they would be subject to Oregon's Landlord-Tenant Act and could not come to the property and stay there for like a summer vacation. And again, that certainly wasn't our intent as staff. I don't think it was your intent as the city council, that people couldn't use their own houses. We just required a 12-month lease. We didn't dictate what terms that lease had. And so I assume that if someone wanted to use their short-term rental for their own personal vacation, they could sign a 12-month lease with that kind of provision that they had, the tenants had to let the owner use it for a certain amount of time. So I was kind of surprised at that. And the judge's response was kind of interesting. She said, I don't see that in the ordinance, that people can't use their own homes. And I think also that it's unlikely this judge is going to launch into a analysis of the Oregon Landlord-Tenant Act, which is a very complicated, I hesitate, Hall of Mirrors type statute, but I don't think it's central or required to, they don't have to go through it in this case. What else? What I would assume in this case that we should get a decision on these motions in 4 to 6 weeks. It should decide the case. What I would hope is that the judge sticks to the case law. Ninth Circuit, which is where we are, has validated a short-term rental regulation that requires a long-term residency in the house. So I hope that the judge affirms the ordinance and rejects the challenge to it. But if that doesn't happen, I assume we'll have some guidance as to exactly what is found to be about your ordinance that violates the Commerce Clause. We know that the Santa Monica model has been upheld by the Ninth Circuit. So that's the law of the land. That's the law in district court in Louisiana. Hopefully in the next couple of months, the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals also reaches that same conclusion. So that should be the basis upon which this case gets decided. So with that, those are my observations from the from the argument from the other day. So any questions about the posture of this case or where it's headed, or maybe not? Okay. I think that's it. Abigail, is it time for the executive session?
I think council also has an opportunity to give comments. So I'm going to turn it back over to Councillor Polson. Thank you.
That's all for city manager comments.
That's right.
Yep, thanks. Committee reports. We'll start online with Paul.
Nothing to report on my committee, or as mayor, I'm going to, my Wi-Fi is getting cut off. Thanks, you guys. Goodbye.
Thanks, Paul. Councillor Gaki.
I don't have anything.
Councillor Stupina.
Yeah, Saruda, sister city, a bunch of activity just happened. So not this past week, but the week prior, the delegation came from Saruda. There were 16 children, 3 chaperones. They arrived at Hood River on Thursday. Then on Friday, they went to with their host counterparts, the school that host went to. Friday night, we had a dinner for the host family at the Hood River Saddle Club. The mayor was in attendance and played Roland Columbia with some modified lyrics for, those Woody Guthrie fans out there. And received some gifts from the mayor of Saruda, et cetera. Very, very nice, familial sort of activity. Then the next day was a free day. Then the day after that, there was a bunch of activity as well. The Sunday we had in the morning, went to the Idlewild Cemetery and visited the graves of many Japanese ancestors, some from Saruda, Yasui family, et cetera. And from there went to the firehouse, and everybody got a tour of the firehouse, and they got to actually ceremonially push in our brand new fire engine, right? So the fire engine that we just took possession of recently, the children from Saruda were able to push that in. They also were able to sort of look around the building. One got loaded into an ambulance with that lift that we procured not too long ago. Really cool. They saw the tree at Friendship Park that was planted last year, and then went to go plant another tree at Man Park. So big thanks to Kevin Liberty for being there and, helping fill in dirt and whatnot. He was there early while everybody was, doing the fun stuff at the firehouse. He was making sure the hole was dug properly and all that kind of stuff. They then went to Portland and actually went to a Timbers game, and then came back for the Taste of Saruda. So the Taste of Saruda happened at Mount Hood Winery and was very well attended. We had several counselors in attendance. Councilor Gaki, Councilor Cavallari was there. Various people from the city, planning director Dustin Nilsson was there. Kevin Liberty and I worked the event. Megan Saunders, other members of the board. So it was really nice. There was a silent auction, a live auction, a raffle, et cetera. And then the next day they went to Meadows, and then they went back to Japan. So really awesome. I think we have to keep, our support of this program. It's coming up on 50 years really soon, which is a tremendous achievement, and look forward to, sending a delegation there on not this summer, but the next summer. And really happy to be part of it for the first time. And go Sister City. It was great.
Thanks, Councilor. Councilor Mitchell.
Nothing from me.
Councilor Cavallari.
Nothing from me.
Yeah, I had my next Region 1 Act meeting is in 2 weeks. So good. Council comments. Commissioner not Commissioner. On too much stuff. Councilor Gaki.
I have nothing.
I've got like 20 minutes. No, I'm done. I got nothing.
Councilor Mitchell.
I have nothing.
Councilor Cavallari.
I have something just really quickly, and it might have something to do with our connection at Visit Hood River, but I just want to throw out there digitally that I've heard some rumblings from community members that with tariffs and impacts that are coming to our, nation, we do have a significant group of people that come down from Canada every year. Some of them live here, but are visitors. And I just don't know how that might impact our businesses, our local businesses. And I don't know if it's something that as a city, there is anything that we can do to be supportive. You know, in the discussion related to parking for employees down there on industrial, and just, you know, I'm trying to keep an open mind to how we can be supportive to our locals, and whether that be businesses or citizens or, you know, people that live here and work here. And I think that we might be in for a wild ride here in the next couple of years, and just what we can do maybe to help support. And I just, you know, one of the things that was brought to my attention by a friend was that we might see less tourism because the Canadians might not be coming down to see us. And that just, you know, it's just something to think about. And I don't know if Visit Hood River has considered that, but maybe there are other things that we can be doing to help support our local businesses and help support our local community. Be prepared for that. We should be thinking about it.
You're right. I think just something to add, the web traffic for Visit Hood River is mostly Vancouver, BC. So agree with you. That's something I've thought about asking Katie and them as well at the next meeting.
I'll keep my comments brief. In the spirit of inclusivity and whatnot, and you don't answer me right now, but just for future consideration, if this council wishes to continue on the path that we've decided earlier tonight, then I would introduce to us that we also explore on the same night that we did a proclamation regarding Minyasui, that we perhaps explore free parking for our Japanese neighbors. We perhaps explore free parking for African Americans who came over here involuntarily on slave ships. Perhaps we should explore free parking for any group that has been marginalized in the past in the spirit of inclusivity. That's all I gotta say about that. That's it for council comments. Now, we're not done. We have a script for executive session. They will now meet in an executive session pursuant to Oregon Revised Statute 192.660(1)(h) to consult with counsel concerning the legal rights and duties of a public body with regard to current litigation or litigation likely to be filed. Representatives of the news media and designated staff are allowed to attend the executive session. All other members of the audience are asked to leave the room, and we will end public broadcast. Representatives of the news media are specifically directed not to report on any of the deliberations during the executive session, except to state the general subject of the session as previously announced. No decision may be made, nor final action taken in executive session. The executive session is anticipated to last 20-ish minutes. At the end of the executive session, City Council will be adjourned. No action will be taken. We will now discontinue the live feed and